Hey guys, welcome to Calm History. Tonight we slip beneath the towering stone walls of a medieval castle, not for a grand feast or a noble ceremony, but to settle in for the night. And let me tell you, it's not the kind of cozy sleepover you're used to. The sun has barely dipped below the horizon when the chill starts seeping through every crack in the rock. You feel it first in your fingertips, then your toes, and then, if you're not lucky enough to be near one of the rare fires, your bones start complaining too. This place might look majestic in daylight, but once darkness falls, it's damp, echoey, and oddly alive. You step across uneven flagstones as your breath forms little clouds in the air. The walls are a cold gray, patched with moss and soot, and you swear the stones themselves give off a kind of weary sigh, like they've seen too many long winters and too many bad decisions. Hey guys, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post your location and local time down in the comments? I love seeing where, and when, you're listening in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through the main keep as the castle settles. Footsteps echo, distant and hollow, like someone walking just behind you, but when you turn, of course, there's no one. Maybe just the memory of guards, or prisoners, or nobles long gone. The air smells of old ash, wet limestone, and something faintly sweet, maybe crushed herbs left behind by the cook, or some unfortunate rodent fermenting under the floorboards. The thing about medieval castles is, they weren't built for comfort. They were built for defense. Every design choice, every thick wall, every tiny slit of a window, was meant to keep people out, not keep the warmth in. And so, as night falls, you start to notice the flaws in the fortress's otherwise mighty posture. There's a guard stomping down the outer corridor, muttering under his breath and dragging a lantern that swings wildly with each step. You catch a glimpse of his breath, white puffs in the dark, as he curses at the wind. He's wrapped in furs, leather, and something that might once have been a blanket. But even with all that, he still looks like he's losing the battle with the cold. You, on the other hand, are trying not to trip on your own cloak. The floors are rough, uneven, and slightly damp. Remember, these places didn't exactly have central heating, or, insulation. You pass one chamber where a small fire sputters in a hearth the size of a closet. A few people huddle around it like moths, one of them whispering something about a dream involving a faceless knight. Another crosses himself. Historians still argue whether castles had an organized, lights-out policy, or if the nightly routine was more of a chaotic, individual affair. But what we do know is that when night fell, things got tense. It wasn't just about rest, it was about enduring. Each hour that passed without incident was a small victory. You push open a wooden door, more of a warped, splintered plank balanced in a stone arch, and step into a chamber meant to sleep half a dozen people. Inside, the glow of a single candle flickers on the wall. A dog lifts its head, sniffs in your direction, and decides you're not worth the trouble. It lays back down beside someone curled under what looks like a moldy wool blanket. Another person mumbles in their sleep, twitching violently. Someone else is sharpening a knife in the corner. Just bedtime things. There's a niche in the wall where a tiny icon sits, a saint, maybe, or a worn-out relic that's been kissed so many times the features are gone. You sit beside it, and tuck your knees into your chest, listening to the wind howl through the cracks like some ancient ghost is being dragged down the chimney. A castle might seem like the safest place to be, but it never really feels safe. Especially not at night. You start to notice how thin the walls really are between you and whatever lies beyond them. The outer curtain might stop arrows and battering rams, but it won't stop your imagination. And your imagination is having a field day. Someone sneezes, then coughs again. You hear a few people shift nervously. Sickness is no joke here. If someone's got the plague, or even just a fever, it's going to spread faster than gossip at a royal banquet. You quietly edge away, pretending you just want a better view of the candle. No offense, coughing guy. Your stomach growls. The evening meal was hours ago, and it wasn't exactly filling, barley gruel with a hunk of stale bread and a piece of salt pork that tasted like it had dreams of being fish. You'd kill for a warm drink, but unless you're nobility, the only thing left in the pot is probably a skin of tepid ale that's already been sneezed into. Twice. And so the night stretches. You try to rest. Try to ignore the wind, the footsteps, the flickers of shadow in the far corner of the room. Someone outside is pacing. Maybe a nervous servant, maybe a ghost, maybe a guard trying to stay awake. You pull your cloak tighter, nestle into the straw-stuffed mattress, and whisper a little prayer, not necessarily to a saint, just to anyone who might be listening. This is how the night begins. Not with peace, but with survival. The first gust hits just before midnight, howling through the arrow slits like a wolf testing the perimeter. You flinch, instinctively ducking, though there's no danger, just wind. Just the wind. But when the draft slinks across your bare ankles like cold fingers, you start to understand why people feared the dark in castles more than they feared battlefields. You shuffle deeper under your cloak, but the chill still finds you. The stone walls that towered so proudly during the day now feel like indifferent giants, radiating nothing but damp silence. People always assume castles must have been cozy, grand fires, thick tapestries, warm torches, but that's the fairy tale version. Real medieval castles were drafty, damp, and downright disrespectful to the human body. The truth is, insulation hadn't been invented. At least, not in any modern sense. Some rooms were hung with heavy woolen tapestries or animal skins, but those only helped a little, and not every chamber had that luxury. You'd think thicker walls would help trap heat. Nope. They just trap moisture. And since most of the floors were cold stone, the cold didn't just creep in. It settled, stayed, and then invited its friends. You shift on your shared straw mattress, which, let's be honest, isn't helping either. The straw crackles under you, a few pieces poking through the rough linen. Someone next to you turns and mutters in their sleep, kicking a corner of the blanket off your shoulder. You shiver and tug it back, only to discover it's damp. Of course it is. The window above you, if you can call it that, is a narrow vertical slit carved into the wall, more useful for archers than for fresh air. Unfortunately, it allows both breeze and rain with zero hesitation. There's an old scrap of cloth nailed over the opening, but it flaps like a dying bird every time the wind kicks up. Someone had the bright idea to smear clay around the edges last week to keep the chill out. Spoiler, it didn't work. Historians still argue whether the design of these windows was more about military defense or cost-cutting. Some claim that the lack of large glazed windows was purely for security, while others say glass was so rare and expensive, it simply wasn't practical. Either way, nobody's getting any sleep near one. A candle flickers and goes out across the room. You hear someone curse softly, probably a servant, or a scribe trying to finish a letter or some bookkeeping before dawn. The shadows seem to thicken instantly, making the room feel smaller, like the walls are closing in. That's the other thing about castle nights. They mess with your sense of space. What looked majestic and open during the day becomes tight, maze-like, and strange in the dark. You try to breathe quietly, hoping your exhale doesn't wake anyone. But the air is so sharp it stings your nostrils, and your breath comes out ragged. Someone snores near the hearth, if you can call that ember pile a hearth. It's more a pile of smoldering regret. You silently wish you were closer to it, but those spots were claimed long before the sun went down. Prime real estate, that. In the corridor outside, you hear a door creak open, then close. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Maybe a night guard making rounds. Maybe someone going to the latrines. Maybe either. The echo is too strange to tell. Your thoughts drift, and for a moment, you remember stories you heard growing up. Things that come out at night. Things that live in cold corners and feed on dreams. You shake it off, just tales. But the wind gusts again, and the window covering snaps like a whip. There was once a count, you recall, who ordered sheep's wool to be stuffed into every crevice of his castle walls to keep the cold out. His court mocked him. He died of pneumonia anyway. Others tried lining walls with rushes, furs, or even hay. All failed eventually. The cold always wins. There's a soft moan from the floor above you. Someone having a nightmare, or maybe they just rolled onto a rock. A few stones are loose in the ceilings here, and every now and then one shifts, dropping dust onto whoever's unlucky enough to sleep beneath it. You hope it's not your night. You notice your fingers have gone stiff. You rub them, blow warm air over your knuckles, and tuck them under your arms. Not much better. In winter months, fingers and toes went black with frostbite more often than you'd expect, even inside. Some lords had brass basins of coals brought into their chambers, but servants and guards? You got wool gloves if you were lucky. Otherwise, your hands were just sacrifices to the wind. And forget sleeping in peace. Every draft comes with a sound, a whine, a whistle, a groan. One of the arrow slits in this room has a particular pitch that makes it sound like a dying goat. Every single night. And yet you adapt. Your body tenses automatically, shoulders hunched, breath shallow, eyes darting. You start to think of warmth as a memory rather than an expectation. You learn to sleep in little naps, 10 minutes here, 20 there, because it's hard to truly rest when your spine is shaking. One particularly odd remedy was suggested by a 13th century physician: place a warm stone under your armpit before sleep. Of course, you need a fire to warm the stone, and good luck not burning yourself or the blanket in the process. But people tried it. Because desperate times call for hilariously dangerous solutions. Eventually, your mind dulls with the fatigue. The wind howls on. The window flap dances. Someone in the room grinds their teeth. You wrap yourself tighter, shift a bit, and let your eyes droop. No one survives castle nights by comfort. You survive by getting just cold enough to fall asleep, but not so cold you don't wake up. You wake with a start, not because of a scream or a clash of swords, though those are always on the table in a medieval castle, but because something just bit you. Probably. Could have been a pinch of straw, could have been one of the many creatures who've taken up residence in your bed. But judging by the sharp sting on your ankle and the faint rustling beneath you, you're betting it was something with legs. Many, many legs. Now that you're fully awake, you realize you were never really sleeping. Not properly. Just drifting in and out of awareness while trying not to shiver loud enough to offend your neighbors. You shift your weight, and immediately regret it as a stiff clump of straw jabs your lower back. This is your bed. A lumpy, flattened sack of roughly hewn linen filled with old straw, last changed. Well, it hasn't been. That's the point. You sit up slightly, trying to stretch without waking the others. The movement sends a tiny stampede of bed bugs. Or are they fleas, skittering away into the corners of the mattress? Charming! It's not just you, of course. Every single person in this room, including the nobleman coughing in his sleep, is being slowly consumed by parasites. And you know what? That straw mattress? It's a luxury. Most castle dwellers, especially servants, shared bedding, if they had bedding at all. In the great hall, people just curled up on rush-covered floors, cloaks pulled over their heads, maybe nestled beside the family dog if they were lucky. Your mattress, such as it is communal too. There's barely enough room to lie flat without pressing knees or elbows against the person next to you. You shift again and bump someone's foot. They grunt but don't wake. Probably used to it. There's a tattered blanket draped over you all, but blanket is generous. It's more like a quilt of regrets, patched with old tunics and stiff from repeated freezing. And the smell? Musty, slightly sour, with notes of damp wool and something you're afraid to identify. Medieval bedding was rarely washed. Not because they liked it dirty, but because the process was such a massive ordeal: boiling water, harsh soaps, drying in a sun that rarely shone. So instead, people tolerated the smell. Historians still argue whether vinegar, herbs, or just sheer indifference was the preferred deodorizer. One fringe theory? People rubbed mint leaves or dried lavender into the mattress as a half-hearted attempt at masking the stench. Nice try, Sir Lavender. As you try to reposition yourself, you feel something squish under your palm. Oh no. No, no, no. You slowly lift your hand and in the pale moonlight see a tiny crushed body. Definitely a flea. Probably had friends. You start to itch almost immediately. Psychosomatically at first, and then, no, definitely something moving on your shoulder. There were attempts at pest control. People scattered fresh rushes on the floor not just for softness, but to absorb filth and discourage vermin. Didn't work. Others placed small bundles of herbs, called strewing herbs, under mattresses or in corners. Good for the vibe. Useless for the flea problem. You scratch your ankle and try not to think about lice. But it's no use. Everyone had them. Rich or poor. Even royalty scratched their heads at court, quite literally. Comb usage was more about dislodging bugs than styling. And in winter people were less likely to bathe, which only made things worse. You could freeze to death from a per-time bath, after all. Someone rolls over beside you and steals half the blanket. Typical. You tug it back and sigh into the dark. You remember reading somewhere that a traveler once compared castle bedding to sleeping in a pile of old leaves, if the leaves were wet, moldy, and possibly still alive. That sounds about right. But the worst part? You're starting to get used to it. You lie back down and stare up at the wooden beams overhead. They creak with every gust of wind. One has a visible crack running through it. Hope that's decorative. Probably not. Suddenly, there's a soft squeak near your head. You freeze. Was that? Another squeak. Then a pitter-patter across the beam. Eyes adjust and yep. Rat. Bold little guy, too. He pauses, stares down at you, tail twitching like he's daring you to do something about it. Then he scampers off, disappearing into a hole in the wall you hadn't noticed until now. Rats were everywhere in castles. In the walls, under the floors, behind the hearths. And no, not the cute fairy tale kind. These were scrappy, disease-spreading, floor-chewing monsters. Cats were kept as pest control, but they could only do so much. You've seen at least two in the kitchen area, both looking like they've given up on life. Understandable. You adjust your cloak over your feet. It smells like smoke and onions. Better than the mattress. Barely. You lie still again and try to sleep. Try to ignore the itchiness, the cold, the persistent feeling that your bed has a pulse. Maybe tomorrow, you'll be lucky enough to fetch fresh straw from the barn. Just don't bring back more fleas with it. You finally close your eyes. You let your mind wander. You imagine a feather bed. Clean linen. A quiet room. Then the guy next to you coughs directly into your ear. You sigh. The fire went out. Again. Not with a dramatic puff or a theatrical hiss, just a slow, sulky surrender into blackened coals, like it simply gave up. 1 minute, it's a gentle glow, barely warming the stone. The next, it's a cold pile of ash pretending it was never ambitious to begin with. You watch the last ember wink out like a tired eye, and suddenly the darkness presses in harder, thicker, like the walls are leaning closer just to whisper, "Good luck with that." You try not to groan. Because the fire was the one comfort. The only thing that stood between you and the kind of cold that doesn't just numb fingers. It makes you question your will to live. There's a small pile of wood in the corner, if you're lucky. A handful of half-burned twigs, maybe a warped log that hisses angrily when placed back in the hearth because it's too wet to catch. You nudge it with the fire iron, trying to coax it into remembering its life's purpose. No dice. Fire in a medieval castle was both essential and infuriating. Hearths were central to each room, but they were badly built. Smoke didn't always rise neatly up the chimney. Instead, it often slithered sideways into the room like a moody guest refusing to leave. Some castle halls were so smoky, people coughed more at dinner than they did during the plague. Historians still argue whether the poor ventilation was a flaw of architecture or simply the best they could manage given the materials. Either way, you've breathed in enough smoke tonight to consider yourself lightly cured. But even when the fire does stay lit, it's selfish. It only warms what's directly in front of it. Sit 5 feet away and you might as well be outside. There's no even heat distribution. Here, just patches of comfort surrounded by bitter cold. You and the others tried your best earlier, huddling near the hearth, holding out your hands, rotating slowly like human bread loaves trying to toast evenly. But now that it's gone, it's every frozen soul for themselves. You shift closer to the hearth anyway, hoping for phantom warmth. Someone stirs across the room, grumbling. Out again, they mutter. No one replies. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. One brave soul decides to get up. A dark shape rises, groaning softly, and makes their way to the fire pit. You hear the clink of the poker against stone, then the soft breath of someone blowing on the ashes, trying to summon life from what's left. A few sparks flicker, then die. Another try. A wheeze. And then nothing. Useless log, they whisper. They're right. Firewood was always in short supply during the cold months. Castles went through it like nobles went through wine. And the wood you got wasn't always dry. Sometimes it had been rained on, frozen, even scavenged from the moat. Some clever folks kept peat blocks or animal dung as backup fuel. That's right, dung. Compressed, dried, and surprisingly effective, though you'd never confuse it with a lavender candle. And yes, it's burning right now in some wing of the castle. You just hope it's not near the kitchen. In the absence of fire, you try the next best thing, proximity. You scoot closer to whoever's warmest, even if that person is a heavy-breathing servant who talks in his sleep about sheep. Desperate times, desperate snuggles. Someone shifts to make room. Someone else coughs. You all settle like coals in an old oven, slowly losing heat, but clinging to what's left. You think of the nobility upstairs in their chambers. They get the best wood, the driest logs. And servants to keep the fire stoked through the night. Must be nice. But even then, their rooms aren't exactly toasty. There's a reason nobles slept in hats, gloves, and thick socks. One account from a 15th century castle describes a duchess layering 3 fur-lined cloaks under her blanket. Still caught a chill. Maybe the cold was democratic after all. You curl tighter into yourself, tucking your hands under your arms and your knees against your chest. It helps, slightly. There's an odd comfort in the shared misery. You're not alone in this. Everyone's cold. Everyone's waiting for the sun. But the night drags on. The wind hammers the shutters like a drunk bard demanding entry. The darkness feels endless. You think of lighting a new candle, but the last one burned too fast and the tallow left a stink that made half the room gag. So you sit in the pitch black, listening to the sounds of human survival, sniffles, shuffles, the soft chattering of teeth. Then, just as your eyes start to flutter closed, the old beam above the hearth gives a loud crack. Not a snap. A crack. You shoot upright, hard hammering. Someone gasps. Another yells out. What was that? Half the room is awake now, eyes wide, necks craning upward. But the ceiling holds. Just a warning. Just another little gift from the cold. Eventually, you lie back down, your body aching from the uneven floor and your mind haunted by dreams of warm fires and full bellies. One of those might show up by morning. Maybe. You're not sure what wakes you this time. Maybe a scuff of boot against stone, maybe a muffled voice. But your eyes open to a room that hasn't changed. Still dark. Still cold. Still filled with the soft, restless noise of people surviving the longest part of the night. But something's different. You hear the faint clink of metal. Then low voices, almost whispers, carrying from the courtyard below. You rise just enough to peek through the slit window, pressing your face against the freezing stone. Outside, figures move along the castle walls, slow, deliberate shapes hunched against the wind, torches in hand. The flames bob and spit in protest, barely lighting more than the boots of the guards who carry them. Their breath curls white in the air as they make their rounds, crossing from turret to turret in lonely loops. It's a miserable job, night watch. Always has been. You don't envy them. Not when the wind's clawing at their cloaks, not when one slip on an icy parapet could send them tumbling into the moat below. And not when every shadow looks like it might move. Night patrols were a vital part of castle life. Even in times of peace, there was no such thing as safety. Raiders, spies, rival lords, none of them cared what time it was. A well-placed ladder in the dark could spell disaster, and if you were the poor soul on duty, your job was to see it before it happened. Which was harder than it sounds, given the lack of proper lighting and the fact that you're basically pacing a wall of frozen rock for hours. One of the guards pauses near the far turret. You watch him lean against the battlement, stretch his arms, and then just stand. For a long moment he doesn't move. You start to wonder if he's fallen asleep upright. Or died upright. Wouldn't be the first time. Historians still argue whether guards rotated on regular schedules or just endured until someone remembered to relieve them. There's a famous account of a 14th century gatekeeper who reportedly stayed at his post for 2 full days during a snowstorm because no one came to replace him. He lost 3 fingers to frostbite. Kept the job. Got promoted even. Probably because no one else wanted it. You step away from the window and shiver. That outside air somehow found a way in and wrapped itself around your spine. You pull the blanket tighter, but the chill lingers. One of your roommates sits up, groggy, rubbing their eyes. "Courtyard's noisy tonight," they mumble. You nod, whispering, "Guards again." They sigh. Hope they don't come knocking. Because sometimes they do. A sudden check, a missing patrol member, a suspicious sound. Any of those can lead to doors being banged open and sleepy people hauled into the courtyard to explain why they were snoring during a false alarm. There are rumors, always. About guards disappearing. About tunnels under the castle. About long-dead traitors whose ghosts still walk the ramparts, whispering secrets to the living. Some people say they've seen shapes on the wall, figures that don't carry torches. One guy, a scullery lad named Emmerich, swears he saw a guard vanish mid-step. Poof. Gone. Historians chalk it up to exhaustion or bad wine. But here? You're not so sure. You lie back down and close your eyes again. Try to pretend that the wind is just wind. That the footsteps overhead are entirely human. That the guards outside will complete their route and return safe. But even as you drift, your brain keeps cataloging the sounds, the steady crunch of boots on stone, the occasional jangle of chain mail, the abrupt silence when someone pauses. A dog barks once from the gatehouse. Sharp. Alert. Then nothing. That silence is worse than noise. You think of the torchlight, the tiny circles of flickering orange barely strong enough to cut the dark. Most guards carry torches not to see by, but to be seen. So no one mistook them for something else. Something coming over the wall, or out of the shadows. Sometimes guards would sing quietly to themselves, or whistle, or knock their spears against the stone in rhythmic patterns just to stay awake. You've heard it before, those eerie little melodies echoing off the towers like lullabies for the doomed. You roll onto your side, trying to shut it out. Someone down the hall murmurs in a dream. Somewhere below, a gate creaks. A signal? Or just the wind again? You wonder what would happen if no one patrolled. If the torches went out. If the castle slept all the way. That's when danger always came, didn't it? When people got too confident. Too tired. Another gust rattles the wooden shutter. You flinch. It's nothing. Just the wind, right? You pull the blanket over your head. Just the wind. You're warm. For once, you're actually warm. Which can only mean one thing: something's wrong. You open your eyes in the pitch black and realize it's not warmth exactly, it's urgency. Your body is urging you to move. Not out of fear. Not because of some midnight attack. Just because your bladder is staging a full-scale rebellion. And in a medieval castle, that's not a small problem. It's a mission. You shift under the blanket and immediately regret it. Your legs are stiff, your feet are cold again, and someone's elbow is digging into your hip. But there's no ignoring this need. You wait a minute debating. Maybe it'll go away. Maybe you can fall back asleep and pretend the pressure isn't building like a drumbeat in your belly. But nope. Your body's made the call. You're going to have to face it. Nature calls, and she does not care how cold the floor is. You slowly sit up, trying not to wake the others. One guy mumbles something about cabbage in his sleep. Someone else snores through it. You feel around in the dark for your boots, which of course are nowhere near where you left them. After a quiet but passionate muttering session, you find one under the bench and the other under someone's shoulder. You do not ask how or why. You stand, wincing as your knees crack, and step carefully across the icy flagstones. Each one is a little shock, like walking on frozen iron. You grab a candle stub and fumble for flint. Sparks, sparks, then the briefest glow. The candle flickers to life and casts long shadows on the damp walls. Now the real journey begins. You open the door and immediately regret everything. The hallway is colder than the room. Much colder. You feel it sweep through your cloak like a curse. Your breath fogs instantly, curling around the candlelight in ghostly tendrils. The corridor stretches ahead, uneven, echoey, and unsettling. Your destination? The chamber pot. If you're lucky. If you're unlucky, it's the privy, a freezing, horrifying closet dangling over the castle wall like a cruel joke. Some castles had garderobes, small latrines built into the outer walls with a hole that dropped straight down into the moat, or a pit. And yes, some were shared. And yes, the wind did come back up through the hole. Imagine that on a frosty night. But you're aiming for something closer, the communal chamber pot. You shuffle down the hall, past old tapestries, past a few sconces where torches should be. Past a door no one opens. Ever. You don't want to know why. You find the pot tucked into a little alcove behind a curtain that's seen better centuries. You slide in, squatting like you're avoiding an ambush. It's cold. It smells. The floor is wet. You do not investigate that further. And then, just as you begin your business, someone walks by. You freeze. They freeze. You stare at each other for a beat too long. It's an old man in a night tunic, holding a candlestick and looking deeply unimpressed. He says nothing. Just nods once. Then continues walking, candle bobbing like a disapproving lighthouse. That's the medieval castle experience for you. Zero privacy. Even in the most personal moments, you're still part of a living, breathing, snoring, clanging machine. No room is really yours. No time is ever really quiet. You finish quickly, cover the pot, and hope someone else takes it to be emptied tomorrow. That's a job for the lowest of the low. And yes, it's exactly as bad as you imagine. Emptying chamber pots, hauling waste down narrow spiral stairs, past food stores and sleeping quarters. It's the opposite of glamorous. Historians still argue whether medieval sanitation practices were intentional or just haphazard necessity. Some castles had designated waste disposal systems, channels that ran through the walls, chutes that emptied into cesspits. But most of the time, it was trial and error. Lots of error. One lord reportedly tried to improve the castle's smell by placing fragrant herbs in the garderobes. The result? Floral-scented sewage. For effort. You creep back down the hallway, trying not to trip. A mouse scurries past your foot. You stop, then keep moving. The candle sputters. You whisper a prayer to the wick gods. Halfway back to your room, you hear something. Not footsteps. Not wind. Just a soft plink, like water dripping into a bucket. You glance down a corridor that disappears into shadow. There's a faint glow at the end, maybe from the chapel. You're not going to investigate. That's how ghost stories start. You reach your room, duck back under the blanket, and try to warm your feet against the straw. It doesn't work. Your toes are now officially their own ice sculpture exhibit. Someone has rolled onto your pillow. You nudge them gently. They grunt and don't move. You sigh. All that effort. All that cold. All that awkward eye contact. For one tiny moment of relief. You close your eyes again, swearing that next time, you're just going to hold it. You won't. The scratching starts just as you begin to drift off again. Not loud at first, just a faint rustle, like someone crumpling parchment in slow motion. Then a distinct skitter across the floorboards. You freeze. There it is again. Closer this time. You sit up and hold your breath, ears straining against the dark. Scratch, scratch, skitter? It's not your imagination. You grab the stub of your candle and relight it with practiced hands. The moment the flame flares, you catch a blur of motion, something small and quick darting under a bench, vanishing into a shadow. Your instincts say rat. Your nose agrees. And judging by the soft rustle overhead, there's more than one. Rats. The castle's true residents. And cats? The reluctant landlords. Every castle had cats, not as pets, not for cuddling, but as part of the housekeeping crew. Their job was to keep the rodent population in check, which was about as possible as draining a moat with a spoon. You've seen the castle cats slinking through the kitchens, lounging near the ovens, occasionally swiping a rat when it wandered too close. But mostly, they just watched. Judged. Slept in warm corners while the vermin population multiplied like, well, rats. You glance at the doorway where the big gray tomcat usually lounges. Gone tonight. Probably curled up by the dying kitchen fire, living his best life. Meanwhile, you're sharing your sleeping quarters with creatures that nibble your food, chew your blankets, and leave surprises in your boots. Rats in medieval castles weren't just gross, they were dangerous. They chewed through grain stores, carried disease, and could reduce a carefully preserved cheese wheel to dust in a single night. They got everywhere. One story tells of a knight who woke to find a rat nibbling his toe. He lost the toe. The rat? Still at large. You whisper a few choice words under your breath and pull the blanket tighter around yourself, tucking your feet out of reach. The scratching continues. Someone else stirs across the room. It's back. They mutter, not even opening their eyes. It never left. You whisper back. Where's the cat? Probably drunk again. That gets a muffled snort from another pallet. You try to ignore the noise, but now you're wide awake again, alert to every rustle, every whisper of movement. One rat scampers across the beam above, tail trailing like a ribbon. You watch it with the grim patience of someone who knows this is just another part of life here, right alongside cold fires and shared chamber pots. Historians still argue whether rats were more prevalent in castles or in the towns beyond the walls. Some argue that castles, with their grain stores and warm corners, were rat paradises. Others suggest that the sheer bustle of castle life, cooks, guards, dogs, and yes, cats, kept the population in better check than the urban slums outside. Either way, if you were hoping for a rat-free refuge, the castle wasn't it. You think about getting up to check the food chest, just in case. Last time, a rat chewed straight through the lid and made off with half a salted herring. That was your herring. You haven't forgotten. But the idea of leaving your only warmish spot makes you pause. Instead, you lie back and try not to think about little paws creeping past your pillow. In the far corner, someone groans and tosses in their sleep. A soft thud follows, then a sharp squeak. A pause. I think I stepped on one. A voice mutters groggily. Is it dead? Another whispers. I'm not checking. You all lie in silence, listening for the sound of the rat's revenge. Nothing. Just more scurrying overhead. There were other solutions, tried over the years. Traps made from spring-loaded boards or pits baited with cheese. Poisoned grain. One particularly questionable method involved setting out shallow bowls of milk mixed with ash, which was supposed to appeal to rats' vanity, or something. Didn't work. But people tried it anyway. Because short of a full-time cat militia, the rats were here to stay. And so you adapt. You sleep with your food tucked under your arm. You check your boots in the morning. You learn to live with the fact that at any given moment, there's probably a rodent within 5 feet of you. You close your eyes again and let the scratching become background noise, just another lullaby in the strange symphony of castle nights. It's fine. Totally normal. Completely survivable. Probably. The smell hits you first. Not the sharp sting of smoke, or the sour dampness of stone, but something better. Rich, savory, and slightly burnt, like onions cooked too long in a pot of old beef. It drifts through the hallway and curls under the wooden door like a scent-shaped invitation. your stomach growls in response. Loudly. It's the castle kitchen. At first glance, you wouldn't expect activity this late. After all, dinner ended hours ago, and most of the castle is in some version of sleep or something resembling it. But the kitchen? The kitchen never sleeps. You slip on your boots again and follow the scent down the winding stone passage. Past empty sconces, past storerooms lined with old sacks and barrels, down a flight of stairs worn smooth from years of boots and bad ideas. And then light. Real light. Warm, flickering torchlight spilling from under a thick wooden door. You push it open, and there it is. The great hearth blazes with a low but steady fire. A few embers dance up the chimney as a cauldron simmers on the iron hook, steam fogging the nearby wall. Wooden tables are cluttered with bowls, cleavers, herb bundles, and a surprising number of half-gnawed turnips. A boy sleeps under one of them, curled like a cat. No one seems to mind. 2 kitchen hands are awake. One stirs the pot with a wooden ladle long enough to be a walking stick. The other is hunched over a crust of bread, carving it into thin slices with the intensity of a man solving a puzzle. They glance up when you enter but say nothing. Just nod. You're not the first midnight wanderer. You won't be the last. The castle kitchen in the middle of the night is its own strange little world. A liminal space where day and night blend, where rules blur and the line between work and survival fades. You might be a scullery maid, a guard off shift, or just a sleepless noble with cravings. Everyone finds their way here eventually. You step closer to the hearth and stretch your hands toward the warmth. It's heavenly. The fire here isn't struggling. It's alive, crackling with energy, the kind of heat that makes your bones remember what comfort is supposed to feel like. Still bubbling, the stirrer mutters without looking up. Won't be ready till dawn. What is it? You ask. Whatever's left. And that's the honest answer. Castle stews were ongoing affairs. Bits of yesterday's meat, a few root vegetables, a splash of ale, maybe a handful of barley if you were lucky. Some historians believe a single pot could stay in use for days, constantly topped up, never fully emptied. A living stew. Equal parts nourishment and mystery. The bread carver finishes his work and slides across your way. You take it gratefully. It's stale, dry, and slightly smoky, but to your sleep-deprived, hungry self, it's glorious. You chew slowly, savoring the crunch. One of the cats slinks into the room and settles by the hearth with a groan, as if it too has worked a full shift. It stretches, yawns wide enough to show fangs, and curls into a ball. This one's missing part of its ear. Probably earned that in the Larder War of 47. Kitchen staff were the heart of the castle, unseen by most, but essential. They didn't just cook. They planned meals, preserved food, butchered animals, ground spices, soaked beans, and argued about who burned the lentils. And they did it around the clock. The idea of a night off was as mythical as a rat-free storeroom. You glance around and spot a jug of small ale. You raise a brow, and one of the kitchen hands nods. Go on, then. You take a careful sip. It's warm and a little sour, but it settles your stomach and softens the chill inside your chest. Just what you needed. Historians still argue whether small ale was considered safe or simply less dangerous than water. But in the castle, no one's drinking from the well without side-eye. Ale is life. It's hydration, calories, and low-key sedation all in one mug. Even children drank it, just not too much. Probably. You sit on a stool and let the fire do its magic. For a while you don't speak. No one does. Just the scrape of spoon on pot, the crackle of logs, the sound of the knife being sharpened for morning. Eventually, the carver rises and begins setting out trenchers, flat rounds of stale bread that will serve as tomorrow's plates. They'll soak up meat juice, gravy, and whatever else lands on them before being thrown to the dogs or, if they're still edible, eaten by the poor. You watch him work and think about the rhythm of this place. Even while the castle sleeps, the kitchen prepares. Dawn is just a few hours away, and already tomorrow's meal is in motion. You stand, thank them with a nod, and step back into the hallway. The warmth clings to your skin like a memory. The cold bites instantly, of course, but now you have something to fight it with. You head back to your corner of the castle, belly half full, fingers warm, and mind just a little calmer. The rats can have the floor tonight. You've found a better kind of comfort, one carved out of crusts, embers, and the quiet hum of people doing what they've always done. Keep going. You're barely back under the blanket, still tasting that last bite of crust in your teeth, when someone kicks your shin. Not hard. Just enough to remind you, this bed is not your bed. You groan softly and shift over a few inches, only to collide with someone's elbow. Another grunt, another shuffle. This is the dance of the shared mattress. No one ever really wins. You all just reposition like exhausted chess pieces until the pieces click into something tolerable. You lie still, finally, eyes closed. Then someone sneezes. Loudly. Right beside your head. Welcome to servant sleep. If you've ever complained about a twin mattress, try splitting one, and the blanket, with 2 or 3 other people in a room barely wider than a barn stall. This is what it meant to be a servant in a castle at night. No privacy, no silence, and definitely no personal space. You tuck your arms close and focus on not breathing too loud. There's a strange kind of social code to this shared misery. You don't talk much, unless you're already close. You don't hog the blanket. You don't snore on purpose. And if someone has a nightmare, you pretend not to notice unless they start yelling. Then you nudge them, gently, and murmur something like, "It's just the rats, go back to sleep." Because odds are, it really is just the rats. Sleep in this world isn't restful. It's defensive. You learn to sleep in a crouch, metaphorically and sometimes literally. With one ear open, one eye half-lidded. You're not paranoid. You're just used to being woken for the wrong reason at the worst time. In the rooms above, the lords and ladies recline in wooden bed frames with high headboards and curtains of linen or velvet. Feather mattresses if they're lucky, piles of wool if they're not. Even then, the beds are shared more often than not, with spouses, children, servants, or sometimes visiting nobles who overstayed their welcome. And don't even get started on the political significance of who got to watch someone sleep in those chambers. Intimacy and power were always a tangled mess. But back here, in the quarters reserved for the people who make the castle work, sleep is a game of how quickly you can pass out before your body has time to protest. You twist again. Your straw mattress crunches, releasing a small cloud of dust and possibly a spider. You try not to think about it. Someone's foot grazes your knee. You pretend it's a friendly foot. And yet, somehow, you do fall asleep. That's the miracle of exhaustion. The human body has an uncanny ability to ignore discomfort once it crosses a certain threshold. Hunger, cold, itchiness, general shame, all start to blur when you're running on 3 hours of broken rest and a belly full of weak ale and barley scraps. Historians still debate just how much sleep people got in the medieval world. There's the first sleep and second sleep theory, that people naturally woke up in the middle of the night before drifting off again. Some claim it was common to use that middle time for prayer, quiet chores, or even social visits. Others argue the split sleep model came later and wasn't universal. You're not sure which camp you belong to, but you are currently experiencing something between the two, a state of not sleep, not wake. Just waiting. You listen to the breathing around you. Someone snores. Someone whimpers softly. A girl down the row coughs and then sighs. One of the kitchen boys mumbles something about onions. The guy beside you shifts and mutters, "Don't touch the goose." You wonder vaguely if that was meant for you. Then there's a loud creak from upstairs, a floorboard groaning under some unseen weight. Everyone hears it. The room stills for a moment. You don't move. Just wait. A distant door closes. The castle holds its breath. Nothing happens. Just another noble pacing after midnight. Or a restless ghost. Hard to say. You let your body go heavy. You tuck your knees tighter and breathe in the familiar smells. Dust, damp wool, stale rushes, someone's feet. You try not to judge. Sleep here is a patchwork thing. You steal it where you can. 20 minutes before the sun rises. Half an hour before someone starts clanging pots. A blink, a breath, a little stretch of quiet when no one's coughing, stepping over you, or demanding that you fetch something. From a room that has never had enough light. You don't remember closing your eyes. You just fade. Because that's what sleep is in the servants' hall. Not a luxury. A survival tactic. You don't know why you wake, but you do. Not from noise this time. Not even the usual cold. Just a strange awareness. Like something in the room has shifted. You open your eyes slowly. The candle stub you left burning earlier has long since died, leaving the chamber blanketed in velvet black darkness. You lie still, listening. Then you hear it. A whisper. Low. Careful. Two voices, near the far end of the room. Not arguing. Not shouting. Just murmuring. You strain your ears. Shouldn't be here. Keep your voice down. The words fade again into a hush. Now, let's be clear. Castle nights already mess with your head. The wind makes things groan. Pipes creak. People talk in their sleep. You've had entire conversations with the wall before realizing it was just your imagination. But this is different. You're wide awake now. And those voices are real. You sit up slowly, careful not to rattle the straw mattress or bump the person snoring softly beside you. You inch your feet into your boots, still damp, of course, and wrap your cloak around your shoulders like a shield. The whispers continue. You ease your way across the floor, every step a negotiation between curiosity and common sense. The closer you get to the far end of the room, the more clearly the voices come into focus. Two men, both speaking in that fast, careful tone people use when they know they shouldn't be talking at all. Left tower's passage. After bells. Keys hidden in. A sudden creak underfoot. You freeze. So do they. Dead silence. You hold your breath. A chair scrapes back fast. Someone bolts. You rush to the spot, but there's no one there. Just the faint echo of retreating footsteps, already swallowed by stone and distance. You blink into the dark. Was that a dream? A trick of the night? Or did you just stumble on something you absolutely weren't meant to hear? Castles have secrets. That's not news. But they tend to keep those secrets better than most. Old passageways, hidden doors, sealed staircases, some so well concealed that even the current residents don't know they exist. Historians still argue whether some of these were built intentionally for escape, or simply the result of overlapping construction and poor record-keeping. Either way, once in a while, someone stumbles across one. And sometimes, they wish they hadn't. You return to your spot by the wall, unsettled now. You lie back down, but you can't shake the feeling that something is moving beneath the surface of this castle, that these stone walls know more than they let on. You think of that story about the West Tower, the one that everyone whispers but no one tells straight. The Duchess who vanished from her bed without a trace. 1 minute she was asleep beneath her embroidered blanket, the next gone. No signs of struggle. Just the faint scent of rosemary and a window left open. Some say she escaped. Some say she was taken. And some say she still walks the corridors at night, knocking gently on doors that never open in time. You try to tell yourself that's just gossip. Castles breed stories. People love a good haunting, especially when they're stuck in a freezing room full of strangers with no privacy and too many rats. Ghost tales are a way to explain the unexplainable. And yet, a gust of wind whistles through a crack near the ceiling. You flinch anyway. Someone nearby shifts and groans, then settles again. You pull the blanket higher. When you finally start to relax, there's another sound. Faint. Like someone dragging cloth across stone. You look up. Nothing. Of course there's nothing. Still, your heart thuds in your chest a little louder than before. You think of your own voice. Your own whisper. If you spoke now, who would hear you? Just the castle. And she keeps her secrets. The drip is back. You don't know when it started, or why it always seems to wait until just after your body finally gives into sleep, but there it is again. Plip, plip, plip. You open one eye and stare into the blackness. It's somewhere near the far wall. Not close enough to deal with, but not far enough to ignore. The kind of sound that worms its way into your brain and settles in like an unwelcome guest. Plip, plip, plip. Stone buildings, especially ancient, poorly ventilated castles, aren't known for staying dry. Especially in winter. Especially when the mortar between the stones cracks and seeps. There's no telling where the water comes from. Condensation, a leaky roof, the very walls sweating from centuries of damp breath. Doesn't matter. It always finds its way inside. You roll over and bury your face in the crook of your arm. It helps. Briefly. Then another sound cuts through the quiet. A low, steady groan. You freeze. That wasn't someone turning over in bed. That was the building itself. Castles are never truly still. The stone shifts. The beams creak. The wind howls down the chimney shafts like a beast trying to claw its way through the flue. You've learned not to jump at every little noise, but tonight it's all piling up. Plip. Groan. Whisper of wind. Distant scuffle. You sit up. Again. The room is unchanged. A scattering of sleeping bodies curled into cloaks, shapes gently rising and falling with shallow breath. One figure nearby has an arm flopped across their eyes. Another has burrowed into a corner, face pressed to the wall. And still. Plip. 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 A slow drop of water landing into something. A pan, a bowl, maybe a crack in the floor. You'll never find it in the dark. You sigh. Back in the day, someone might have tried plugging the leak with beeswax or cramming rags into the stonework. But mostly, they just endured it. That's what castle living was. You endured. One noble once wrote that he hired a monk to bless away the persistent drip in his bedroom ceiling. The monk did it. The drip didn't stop. And the monk caught pneumonia. So, mixed results. Historians still argue whether medieval castles were ever meant to be lived in long term, or if they were glorified bunkers. Some say they were status symbols first, fortresses second, homes a distant third. Others argue that they were homes, just not very good ones. Either way, comfort was not high on the list of design features. You swing your legs over the side of your bedding and rest your elbows on your knees. The stone is cold against your bare feet. Of course it is. A distant sound drifts in from the lower level. A thump. Then silence. You stare at the door. Probably a barrel shifting in the pantry. Or a log falling in the hearth. Or a rat knocking something over with its freakishly strong tail. You tell yourself this. Repeatedly. Someone across the room coughs. A deep, rattling cough that seems to pull the warmth out of the air. A few people stir. No one checks. We're all too used to these sounds now. Like background music for the insomnia concert. You lie back down and try not to listen. But now the other sounds are joining in. A tapestry flaps softly on the wall. A metal hinge squeals faintly somewhere above. And is that a scream? No. Probably an owl. Hopefully. Castle nights aren't quiet. Not really. They just pretend to be. You remember a tale told by one of the older kitchen maids, that the castle was built on the bones of something ancient, something that doesn't like to be disturbed. She always says that if you listen closely at night, you'll hear it groaning. Not the stone, not the wood, but the bones below. You chuckled the first time she said it. But you didn't laugh the second time. Especially not when the wind moaned through the archway like something remembering how to breathe. You close your eyes. Plip, plip, plip. And then, just to keep things interesting, someone screams in their sleep. You jolt upright. A few people groan, someone curses. The screamer gasps and mumbles. Just a dream, just a dream. Someone tosses a pillow at them. It misses. You lie back down. No one asks what the dream was about. Because we all know. There's a room no one talks about. You didn't even know it was a room at first. Just a blank stretch of wall on the far side of the east wing corridor, tucked behind a heavy tapestry depicting Saint Hubert, the patron saint of hunters, looking eternally exhausted. Fitting, really? Because if the stories are true, whatever's behind that tapestry hasn't slept in centuries. You first heard the rumors on your third night here. Someone whispered about it while peeling onions in the kitchen, how the room was sealed off decades ago, maybe longer. No one remembers why. Or more accurately, everyone claims they don't remember. That kind of forgetting is suspicious. The sort of forgetting that's passed down on purpose. Tonight, as you tiptoe down the corridor to find a warmer corner or maybe a forgotten hearth, you pause in front of that tapestry. Just for a second. The corridor is colder here. It always is. You tell yourself it's just a draft, just the placement of the tower windows. But even in the summer, this hallway never feels warm. And the torchlight never burns quite as bright here. Like the air itself resists illumination. You lift the edge of the tapestry. Not far, just a peek. Behind it? Stone. Rough and gray like every other castle wall. Except, there's a door. Or what used to be a door. A faint outline, arched and narrow, barely visible in the mortar. The stones don't quite match here. Like someone filled it in hastily, like a mouth closed in panic. You let the tapestry fall. Quickly. Every castle has one. A room that isn't listed on any maps, that's never mentioned in the steward's records. A room sealed off without ceremony, its story reduced to a whisper and a shrug. In this one, some say a noble died in strange circumstances. Others say it was a servant. One version claims a visiting bishop vanished there during Lent. Another insists a child was born with black eyes and never spoke a word. You tell yourself it's just a room. But you still don't walk past it at night. Even now, standing here, your feet grow heavy. The air seems thicker. You feel watched. But you turn your back anyway and walk on. Slowly. Respectfully. Historians still argue whether these sealed rooms were functional, built over during renovations, or if they were truly left untouched for a reason. One fringe theory suggests these spaces were used for isolating the sick during outbreaks, then permanently sealed to prevent bad luck from escaping. Another claims they were architectural miscalculations, too unstable to use but too costly to remove. Still, the servants say prayers when they clean this wing. Quiet ones, mouthed behind their hands. You return to your sleeping quarters and lie back down, but the air feels different now. Like you've carried something with you. A shadow in your cloak. A silence clinging to your boots. You close your eyes, but behind your lids is the image of a wall that used to be a door. Of stones stacked too quickly. Of mortar still wet with fear. Someone beside you mutters in their sleep. Not again. You try not to wonder what that means. Far in the distance, from the east corridor, there's a soft sound. A kind of hollow knock. Maybe a rat. Maybe not. You pull the blanket over your head and remind yourself, castles are full of strange stories. This is just one of them. The kind people don't tell. You never wanted the tower room. No one wants the tower room. It sounds prestigious at first, high above the courtyard, with a view of the valley, a little privacy. But then you spend one night up there and realize why it's always mysteriously available. It's the draft. The kind of draft that isn't content to sneak in under the door or curl around your ankles. No, this one sweeps. It howls. It circles you like a predator, peeling at your cloak, probing beneath your blanket, slipping down the back of your neck and whispering you chose wrong. You're not even sure where it's coming from. The windows are tiny arrow slits, each no wider than your forearm, and yet the wind finds a way. It squeezes through ancient mortar like a ghost through a keyhole, and it never, ever stops. There's a reason the tower was used for storage, or isolation, or punishment. You sit on the edge of your lumpy cot, wrapped in every layer you own, staring out into the dark. The moon hangs low tonight, barely visible through the slit. Below, the castle is a sleeping beast, shadowed and silent, its halls folded up like limbs. And here you are. At the top. Alone. Freezing. The stone underfoot is colder than the air. Your breath forms little clouds, then vanishes instantly, as if even the atmosphere wants nothing to do with this room. The walls sweat with condensation. Your blanket crackles with frost. You'd build a fire if you could, but this room wasn't designed for comfort. There's no hearth. Just a rusted iron hook where a torch might have hung, and a few warped boards that once made up a storage shelf. Someone tried to carve their name into the corner wall. You run your fingers over the letters. ART, and then it fades into a gouge. Like they were interrupted. You lie down, curling into a tight ball, trying to hold on to your body heat. It escapes immediately. The mattress is little more than wood shavings in a sack. The blanket is stiff with old stains and smells faintly of vinegar and something sweeter. Rose water? That seems wildly out of place. The wind screeches through the slit like a warning. You try to close your eyes. Try to sleep. You cannot. Even exhaustion can't win in this place. The tower room doesn't allow for dreams. It sharpens your thoughts, picks at your insecurities. Makes you hyper-aware of every creak, every moan of the timbers above, every tap 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 that echoes from somewhere beneath the floor. Is there a floor? Below you? You think back to the staircase. It spirals down from here, just one direction. And the space beneath this room? Bricked up. You try not to dwell on that. Historians still argue whether tower chambers were ever meant for sleeping, or if they were simply the result of overbuilding, too many levels, too little practicality. Some records show that lesser guests were occasionally quartered in towers as an honor. Others suggest that sending someone to the tower was more of a polite exile than a gift. There's a story from this very castle, one of those that always surfaces after dark, usually over cups of ale. A steward's assistant once went missing. Last seen headed to the tower to do inventory on the grain storage. They say he never came back down. Just stopped being mentioned. His name scratched out of the rolls. His boots still up there, beside the wall. You tell yourself that's just a tale. But you did see a pair of boots when you came in. And they're not yours. You lie very, very still. Wind rattles the wooden beam above your head. Something scrapes faintly against the outer wall. A loose shutter? A bird? Please be a bird. Then silence again. Not peace. Just silence. The kind that thickens around your ears and presses into your chest. You begin to count your breaths. Not to fall asleep, just to remind yourself you're still here. 1, 2, 3. The floor creaks. You stop counting. No one else should be up here. You listen. Nothing. Then you remember, in some castles, the tower rooms were used for storing salt meats and smoked fish. The cold made them perfect for preservation. But if someone had died up here, say during a siege, and there was no one left to carry them down, you sit up. The wind gusts again, this time with enough force to knock your candle over. The holder clatters to the floor. You grab it and hold it tight. You're not sleeping tonight. The morning sun doesn't rise all at once. It creeps. First a faint light appears behind the distant hills, soft and gray, like someone opening a door just a crack. Then a thread of gold catches the tops of the trees beyond the castle walls. You don't feel it though. Not in the tower. Here, the cold owns the early morning. You stand at the arrow slit and press your hand against the stone, out of habit now, not curiosity. Yep. Still freezing. Your breath leaves another slow curl in the air as your eyes adjust to the landscape below. And then you see it. The moat is frozen. Not rimmed with ice. Frozen. Solid. You blink. Lean closer. The surface is dull, pale, and unmoving, glazed like the top of an old tart left too long in the cold room. You stare at it for a long moment, heart sinking. This isn't just weather. This is a problem. Because a frozen moat, while beautiful, changes everything. It's the one feature of a castle designed to say, no, really, don't even think about it. Moats weren't always full of water. Some were dry ditches, others bristling with stakes or filled with refuse to deter climbers. But when a moat did hold water, it was supposed to be a barrier. A moving, cold, filthy moat meant you couldn't easily cross it. You couldn't roll siege towers across it. You couldn't sneak in, and you definitely couldn't walk across it. But now it's a bridge. You hurry down the spiral stairs, every step echoing with urgency. The stones are slick with frost, the railing icy under your palm. You pass a half-asleep guard on the landing who grunts something about firewood. You don't stop. By the time you reach the lower level, the kitchen is waking, the great hall is stirring, and people are beginning their slow shuffle toward bread, porridge, or whatever's left in the pot. You slip past them and out into the courtyard. The cold bites harder here. You tug your cloak tight and march to the gatehouse wall. 2 guards are already peering over the battlements. "You see it?" one mutters. "Of course I see it," the other grumbles. "How could I not?" You peer over. The moat is more than just frozen, it looks inviting. Smooth, white, harmless. Like a path laid gently across the water just for the brave or the stupid. "Has anyone walked it yet?" you ask. The older guard glances sideways. "Not from inside." That's the fear. Because a frozen moat isn't just a risk. It's an opportunity, for the wrong people. You scan the tree line beyond the outer wall, suddenly alert to every branch, every shadow. The forest looks quiet. But that's the problem with danger. It doesn't knock. You remember what happened last winter in another castle up north. Raiders waited for the deepest freeze, then crept across the ice in silence, axes wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound. They were inside before anyone realized the moat was useless. Historians still argue whether freezing moats actually led to more sieges, or whether this is a story that grew larger with retelling. Some records say guards were doubled during freezes, others suggest the cold was so brutal that no one attacked. Anyway, but the fear was real. You can feel it in the way people glance over their shoulders today. In the way extra torches are being lit along the inner wall. In the way someone whispers, "Should we sound the bell?" "No," says the guard. "Not yet." You walk back across the courtyard, suddenly aware of how exposed everything feels. The gate. The towers. Even the firewood stack seems vulnerable. And of course, there's talk now, hushed chatter around every brazier. The ice looks thick. Too thick. What if someone tries it tonight? You imagine it. A shape moving across the white surface after sunset. Silent. Steady. Axe in hand. The only sound the crack of brittle ice beneath a boot, then nothing. You return to your quarters and find your bedding already rolled up by someone who wanted the warmer spot. Fair enough. You pick a colder one by the door and sit with your back against the stone. The fire in the hearth is out again. Naturally. But now, it's not the cold that bothers you. It's what might come with it. It starts as a soft jingle. Not a festive one. Not merry. Just the faint metallic sound of links moving, unhurried but unmistakable. Then a dull clink, followed by a grunt, then the low murmur of a voice too tired to care that others are still asleep. You roll over and see him, the poor soul assigned to sleep beside his armor. He's crouched near the hearth, or where a fire would be if the fire hadn't given up 3 hours ago, methodically checking each strap and buckle. It's not that he expects to wear it soon. Not exactly. But in a castle, you never leave your armor too far from your reach. Especially at night. You sit up, wrap your cloak tighter, and nod. He nods back without stopping. In theory, castle guards work in shifts. One group sleeps, one patrols, one pretends to patrol. But there's always at least one soldier sleeping within reach of full gear, just in case something breaches the walls, an ambush, a fire, a noble having a bad dream and needing someone to chase away the darkness with a spear. You watch as he lifts the breastplate. It's not gleaming or grand. No one here has tournament armor with polished etching or gold rivets. This is dull iron, battered and patched, shaped more like a desperate suggestion of a chest than an actual human torso. But it works. Mostly. He sets it down beside him with a soft thud. It sounds heavier than regret. You've never tried sleeping next to chainmail, but based on the way he keeps shifting on the straw, it's not recommended. It smells of oil and rust, with a hint of sweat baked in from the last warm day. which was, what, a decade ago. The helmets beside him, too. A heavy nasal helm with a long scratch down one side, like someone tried to carve a warning into it mid-battle. Or mid-bar fight. Hard to say. You watch as he rolls up a piece of cloth, padding for the inside of the helmet. No one ever talks about how much padding armor takes. Without it, the steel bangs against your skull every time you breathe. But with it, you're just a slow, heavy target sweating into a linen burrito. He shifts again, trying to lie back. The mail hauberk clinks as he adjusts it like a very aggressive blanket. It's a lullaby of metal. Jingle. Thump. Grunt. Jingle. Someone across the room groans and buries their head under their arms. You lie back and stare at the rafters. There's something strangely comforting about the presence of armor in the room. As if danger will see it and politely back away. But it's also a reminder of what could happen, of what has happened. This castle has seen battle. You've seen the marks, scars on the stone where fire touched too long, sword gouges on door frames, the long crack on the outer wall no one can explain. Some say it was a siege engine. Others blame an earthquake. One guy insists it was a dragon, but not the fire kind. He also eats soapberries. Take that how you will. Historians still debate how often castle garrisons actually had to mobilize in full gear. Some argue that real attacks were rare, that most threats were handled through negotiation, feasts, or arranged marriages. But others say there were more skirmishes than we know, more nights when armor wasn't just decor, but survival. You glance back at the guard. He's asleep now. Helmet beside his head, hand resting on the hilt of a short sword still in its scabbard. It's a posture you've seen before, half resting, half ready. The kind of sleep that vanishes the moment someone yells to arms. And you wonder what that's like, to sleep with your protection beside you, heavy and awkward and essential. To rest while always ready to fight. You don't wear armor, not like that. But you do have your own defenses, your cloak, your silence, your habit of keeping one eye open. Everyone in the castle carries something to guard against the dark. For some, it's steel. For others, it's superstition. Prayer. A charm worn around the neck. A bone tied with red thread. A pouch of salt under the pillow. You've seen them all. Because in a castle, the enemy doesn't always knock. Sometimes it creeps. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes it lives right down the hall. The armor shifts as the guard rolls over in his sleep. The chain mail sings softly. Jingle. Jingle. Rest. You pull your blanket tighter and close your eyes. And for now, with iron in the room and the moat still frozen, you drift again. Because even in a place like this, when someone else is sleeping with a sword, you let yourself rest just a little deeper. It only takes one candle to burn down a castle. That thought drifts lazily across your mind as you watch the flame flicker dangerously close to a pile of woolen cloaks stacked near the door. Someone left it lit, probably while stumbling toward the latrines, and now it leans at an awkward angle in its sconce, the wax pooling rapidly beneath it like a tiny molten puddle of intent. You sit up. No one else seems to notice. Or they're pretending not to. Either way, it's your problem now. You shuffle across the cold stone, the hem of your tunic swishing with each step. The room is full of soft breathing, the occasional snore, and the unmistakable scent of too many bodies packed into too small a space. It's a tinderbox, really? One bad move and the entire chamber could turn into a cautionary tale. You reach the sconce and gently lift the candle out. The base is scorched and wobbling. You tilt the wax and relight it, then wedge it safely into a lower niche farther from the cloaks. Crisis averted. Sort of. You sit for a moment, crouched beside it, warming your hands. The flame dances gently now, subdued. You watch it flicker, hypnotic, alive. Candles were precious in the medieval world. Made from tallow, rendered animal fat, or beeswax if you were lucky, or wealthy. They weren't just light sources. They were symbols of wealth, vigilance, even divine favor. To own enough candles to keep a corridor lit all night? That said something. Usually, you're rich. Tallow candles stank. There's no polite way to say it. They smelled like old meat and smoke and sadness. But they were cheap and everywhere. Beeswax was better, brighter, longer lasting, and mercifully scentless. But it was for the chapel, the high table, or the ladies' chamber. Not for servants or guards or scribes squinting over parchment at 3 a.m. You've burned your fair share of both. The worst, though, is open flame in a castle full of dry rushes, ancient timber beams, and wool everything. You remember the story from 3 winters ago, castle to the north. A dropped torch in the stables, a gust of wind, and by dawn, nothing remained but ash and 2 stone towers that now lean like drunkards in the mist. There's a reason some servants carried lanterns instead. But lanterns were expensive, and glass panes even more so. So most just walked carefully and hoped the draft didn't snuff their candle, or blow it sideways into something very flammable. You've seen someone's hair catch fire. Just once. It was terrifying. It was also, if you're honest, a little funny, afterward, once you knew they were okay. Long braids, stiff with oil, lit up like a wick. The poor girl shrieked, ran 3 circles around the bench, then dunked her head into a pot of rinse water. She smelled like burned pork for a week, and the rest of you laughed every time you got near. Quietly. Respectfully. Mostly. You touch your own hair now, just to be sure. Still damp from earlier. Still attached. Good. You head back to your bed, careful with your steps, watching for loose rushes or low beams. There's something about nighttime in a castle that makes everything sharper. Not just the cold, but the risks. Fire. Illness. Thieves. Unexplained drafts. Spilled chamber pots. You start to see danger in every corner. Historians still debate how common castle fires really were. Some argue they were rare, that the stone construction prevented widespread damage. Others say the records are incomplete, that dozens of small fires were quietly extinguished or covered up to save face. One 13th century steward kept a tally of every flame-related incident in his ledger. The final count for the year? 34. That's almost 3 per month. You lie down again, facing the candle now safely out of cloak's reach. Its warm glow paints a gentle amber pattern across the wall, flickering shadows of window bars, rafter beams, and someone's boot left out to dry. Someone coughs in their sleep. A low, wet sound. You try not to think about it. You focus on the flame. On the way it dips, then rises like it's breathing with you. Somewhere above, wind whistles through a chimney flue. The candle flutters. You tuck yourself tighter into the blanket. You wonder who's keeping watch tonight. You wonder if they're carrying a torch. And you hope, for everyone's sake, that they're careful where they put it down. The barking wakes you. Not frantic, not panicked, just persistent. Low, raspy, rhythmic. Somewhere between the cadence of a guard's footsteps and the drumming of rain against the shutters. You lie still for a moment, eyes wide, listening. Then you hear a grunt. A rustle. And then, a squeal? You sit up. Dogs in the hall. Again. You poke your head out of the blanket, and the scene confirms what the sound suggested. 2 dogs, medium-sized and muddied, have made themselves quite at home just inside the door. One's chewing what appears to be someone's boot. The other is licking a patch of straw that may or may not have recently been part of someone's bedding. Not again. Someone mutters behind you. Oh yes. Again. Castle life comes with animals. Lots of animals. You don't get to build an entire stone fortress in the middle of nowhere, and not share it with a small ark of unwilling cohabitants. But the thing is, animals in castles weren't just outside in the stables. They were everywhere. Dogs in the hallways. Cats in the kitchens. Chickens in the scullery. Occasionally pigs in the cellars, especially during winter, when keeping them outdoors meant saying goodbye to bacon before it ever got salted. And while in daylight this might be charming, something out of a lively medieval tapestry, at night it's chaos. A dog barking can echo through stone corridors like a trumpet blast. A pig rooting around for food in the dark sounds exactly like a burglar. And a chicken startled from its perch? That's an alarm clock and a heart attack rolled into one. One of the dogs snuffles toward you. You know this one, Barlow. Belongs to the steward, technically, but really he just follows warmth and the smell of food. He flops down beside you with a wheeze and lets out a sigh so deep and human you almost apologize for not leaving more space. You scratch behind his ears. This is how it goes. If there's heat, food, or a familiar voice, the dogs will find it. And honestly, they're good company. Better than most of the guards. Less likely to steal your bread. Still, you're reminded of last week, when a dog got into the buttery and chewed through half a sack of flour. White paw prints everywhere. The steward was not amused. The dog was very amused. The other dog, the boot chewer, is less familiar. He's skittish, limping slightly, maybe a stray from the village who found an open gate and a warm spot. You watch as he paces, unsure whether to stay or leave. Then someone throws a crust across the room. It skitters across the floor and lands near the hearth. The dog trots over, eats it in one gulp, and promptly lies down like he's lived here for years. And that's that. New resident acquired. Historians still argue whether castles had designated areas for animals within their living quarters. Some believe animals were mostly kept in outer buildings, like stables, barns, or separate kitchens. Others point to records, letters, inventories, even scribbled complaints, that suggest domestic animals frequently wandered through human spaces. It wasn't just tolerated, it was expected. You've seen the lists. 2 mastiffs for the Great Hall, 3 cats for the pantry, 1 pig to be kept for festive slaughter. Sometimes they even named the animals. One lord insisted his cat be referred to as Sir Whiskerbone. You can respect that. The truth is, animals were as much a part of the castle's nightly landscape as torches and cold stone. They were warmth, protection, food security, occasionally amusement. You lie back down, and Barlow curls up beside your legs. His body is warm, solid. He smells like damp straw and boiled oats, and something vaguely meaty. You don't mind. It's better than the foot of the guy who slept there last night. Somewhere outside the room, a pig grunts. A low, echoey sound, like it's navigating the undercroft. You hope someone shut the grain room. Then again, maybe the pig's doing inventory. You drift again. One ear tuned for barking. One hand resting lightly on Barlow's back. Just another night in a castle. Surrounded by stone, strangers, and someone else's livestock. You're jolted awake by a sound no one in a castle ever wants to hear in the middle of the night, snoring. Not your own. Not even the soft, nasal purring of someone deep in harmless rest. No, this is legendary snoring. The kind that vibrates through stone, that rattles candle sconces, that could potentially be classified as an earthquake in a less medically aware century. You blink, dazed, disoriented, and already defeated. You know exactly who it is. Across the room, half buried in wool and straw, lies Thaddeus the carpenter, also known as the lumber mill, for obvious reasons. Every night, he falls asleep within 10 seconds of hitting the bed. Every night, he begins what can only be described as an aggressive performance art piece involving his sinuses, an apparent tuba lodged in his throat, and the deep resentment of everyone within a 10-meter radius. You sit up and look around. Yep. Others are awake too. One woman is pressing her fingers into her ears. Another stares blankly at the ceiling, mouthing silent curses. Someone by the door has given up entirely, and is now just muttering, "Why?" over and over into their blanket. You've tried everything, rolled up tunics over the ears, stuffing your cloak around your head like a makeshift helmet, even whispering, "Thaddeus," until he briefly stirred and let out one massive final snort before resuming, louder than before. There's nothing to do but endure. It's one of the unspoken truths of medieval castle nights. Whoever snores loudest wins. And it's never you. Of course, the open hall sleeping arrangements don't help. Space is limited. Blankets are shared. The only thing separating you from the person beside you is a mutual agreement not to elbow each other on purpose. If you're lucky, you get a corner. If not, you're part of the great tangle of limbs and cloaks, packed together like cargo, hoping nobody rolls over with a dagger still at their belt. You try to roll away from the noise. It doesn't work. The snoring follows. Echoes. Amplifies. Possesses the rafters. You're fairly sure a pigeon just abandoned its perch from the sheer vibrations. You consider throwing something. A boot. A crust of bread. Maybe a rat. But Thaddeus is built like a barrel and once slept through a thunderstorm and a minor fire. Nothing's going to change. And the worst part? You've snored too. You remember it vaguely, waking up mid-snort one night with several very pointed glares directed your way. Someone even drew a tiny caricature of you in the corner of a wax tablet the next day, mouth open, cartoon Z's above your head. Revenge, perhaps, for your turn in the noise parade. Historians still argue whether snoring in communal living spaces led to formal sleeping rotations. Some suggest castle servants may have staggered rest periods to avoid disturbances. Others believe everyone simply suffered together and developed unnaturally high tolerance to each other's bodily sounds. You're not so sure about the tolerance part. Someone nearby lets out an exaggerated sigh. Then, miracle of miracles, Thaddeus stops. Silence. A hush falls over the chamber like a benediction. You all wait, ears tense. Nothing. You dare to hope. You lie back, exhaling slowly. Eyes drifting shut again. Sleep begins to return. HHHHHHHHHNNNNGGGHHHHK. There it is. The grand return. Several people groan. A blanket gets thrown. Someone actually yells, "Come on, man!" No response from the sleeping symphony. You cover your head with your arms. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. Thaddeus is now in Act 2, and the performance is robust. And yet, somehow, the others begin to fade. The human body is miraculous that way, capable of tuning out almost anything if it's repeated long enough. Eventually, even the snoring becomes background noise. You drift too, dreaming, perhaps, of your own little chamber, far from the great hall, with a real door and a bed of your own. And absolutely no Thaddeus. The candlelight flickers again, this time not from wind, but from movement. A shadow passes down the corridor, silent and deliberate. You glance toward the doorway, half expecting it to be a guard on late patrol, or maybe another dog looking for somewhere warm to sleep. But it's either. It's the scribe. You recognize the narrow shoulders, the ink-stained fingertips, the way he cradles his candle like it's a wounded bird. He walks without sound, even on the echoing stone, years of practice making him a phantom by necessity. You watch as he slips through the doorway into the next chamber over, vanishing like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence no one's finished writing. Scribes don't keep normal hours. Their world runs on the schedule of lords, disasters, omens, and inventory lists. They write by candlelight long after the castle sleeps, their quills scratching out prayers, ration logs, or records of how many onions were missing from the pantry this week. That's the thing about life in a medieval castle. Everything gets written down. Eventually. And sometimes, so do you. You lie back, letting the thoughts settle. Because the scribe wrote about you once. You remember it clearly. You had dropped a plate during the midday meal. Just a slip, your hands were cold, the edge slick with gravy, but it hit the floor with a clatter heard all the way to the high table. And later that week, there it was, inked in tiny, precise script. One trencher lost to mishandling. Witnessed by 2. Remedied by reprimand. That was you. Mishandling. Reprimand. Your only appearance in castle history. 3 words long. You wonder what he's writing now. Because the scribes didn't just record facts. They recorded stories. Gossip. Omens. Dreams. Whispers overheard near the chapel. Warnings scrawled in the margins like afterthoughts. You once saw a note in the back of the scribe's ledger. Maidservant claims black dog appeared in her room and disappeared through wall. Second report this month. No name. No date. Just a floating mystery, preserved in ink. Historians. Still debate whether scribes were merely clerks or something more. Chroniclers of truth, yes, but also of fear, of superstition, of the strange little details that make castle life feel less like a machine and more like a living, snoring, occasionally whispering creature. You rise quietly and slip into the next chamber. Just for a moment. Just to see. The scribe is seated at a rough wooden desk, hunched low, candle guttering beside a stack of parchment. He doesn't look up. His quill scratches steadily, every stroke a breath. You hear the rhythm, scratch, lift, scratch, blot. It's oddly soothing. You inch forward. The room smells of old ink and melted wax and the faintest trace of damp vellum. On the table lies a page, half-filled. You can't read it from this angle, and you're not about to lean closer. He may be small, but you know he carries a knife in his boot. But you wonder, what is he writing? A noble's will? An account of how many eels were caught in the moat last week? Or maybe something more curious. Maybe it's the dream someone shouted about last night, the one with the whispering voices in the east corridor. Maybe it's about the frozen moat. Maybe it's your snoring. You almost laugh. And that's when he looks up. Not startled. Just aware. His eyes meet yours with a calm that unnerves you. He dips his quill, pauses, then says quietly, "Trouble sleeping?" You nod. He gestures to the wall. "You can sit. So long as you don't breathe too loud." You smile and settle onto a bench near the door. The candle crackles. The ink dries. The scribe keeps writing. You don't say anything more. You don't need to. Because tonight, history is being written in real time, and for once, you're awake for it. Maybe you'll even get a name this time. You're dreaming. You're certain of it, because in this moment, you're somewhere else entirely. A banquet hall filled with music, golden bread piled high, firelight that warms instead of bites, and no rats. None. Not even one. People laugh and dance and no one coughs. You feel full. Safe. You smile. Then the dream dissolves like sugar in water. Your eyes snap open to the sound of a sharp inhale. Someone beside you is awake. Not awake like you are, groggy and annoyed. Awake like their heart is galloping. You sit up slowly. Your blanket slides to your lap. In the dim firelight, bless the scribe for lighting that hearth before sleep. You can see them, the young scullion boy with the messy hair and wide, glassy eyes. He's trembling. You lean toward him. Bad dream? He nods. His voice is small. The woman again. The one with the missing mouth. Oh, that one. He's not the first to dream of her. You've heard the others whisper. A figure glimpsed in shadowed corners. A pale face. No mouth. No voice. Just watching. Dreams in this place. They're not normal dreams. They're thick with the weight of the stone, the soaked-in memories of centuries. When people sleep here, their minds don't always rest. They wander. Sometimes too far. Don't worry, you whisper, handing him the edge of your blanket. She hasn't visited me yet. He doesn't laugh. He curls closer, tucking the wool around himself like armor. In castles, dreams are more than dreams. They're warnings. Omens. Portents. You've heard the older servants talk about it by the fire. How a dream of rats meant betrayal. How seeing a crow's wing in your sleep meant illness. And how being chased through a doorless corridor meant death was hunting someone nearby. That last one? Yeah. You've had that one. Twice. There's an entire vocabulary of sleep omens passed down from steward to cook to scullion. Some believe in it. Others pretend not to. But when someone wakes screaming in the middle of the night, you all listen. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly interpreted dreams as divine messages or if that's just the impression left by preserved manuscripts. There's even debate about whether the common folk put stock in it, or if it was more of a noble hobby, like falconry or terrible poetry. But here, among the straw mattresses and the freezing walls, dreams have power. You lie back down and close your eyes, though now sleep feels thinner, less trustworthy. And that's when someone else speaks. Last week, A voice whispers from the shadows. I dreamt the sky turned red and all the well water froze solid. When I woke, the roof was leaking again. You glance over. I dreamed of a key. Another murmurs. Wrapped in wool, under a floorboard. The next day, I found one in the laundry room. You realize the room is full of dreamers, and now, in this hush before dawn, they're all confessing. A baby, crying from inside the walls. A man made of smoke, who sat on my chest and told me the names of stars. A night with no eyes, asking for someone I've never met. Each voice adds another piece to the strange puzzle of sleep in a place like this. It's like the castle borrows your mind at night, rearranges the furniture, and gives it back with a knowing smirk. You close your eyes again. Just for a moment. This time, the dream comes faster. You're walking through a corridor you've never seen before, yet somehow know by heart. There's light coming from under a door, yellow and warm. You reach for the handle. You wake up. It's morning. The boy beside you is still curled under the blanket, but his breathing is steady now. The fire's nothing but ash. Somewhere in the courtyard, a horn sounds. Distant. Reluctant. Another day has arrived. But the dreams? They'll be waiting tonight. The bells start softly, as if unsure whether to disturb the fragile quiet. One chime. Then another. A low, resonant tone that rolls through the corridors like a yawn stretching its arms. You hear it before you feel it, but then it sinks into your chest, vibrating faintly through the stone under your back. The chapel bells. It's still dark out, which means it's time for matins. The pre-dawn prayers whispered in cold chapels by colder priests. You're not religious, exactly. But when you live in a castle, you live by its rhythms. The bell rings, you move. Or at least, you try. You groan softly and sit up, bones cracking like someone stepping on old wood. Around you, others stir, some groaning louder, some still pretending they didn't hear anything. A few rise right away, habit, fear, or piety compelling them to act before their bodies fully agree. You're not sure what group you fall into. All you know is that the bells are still ringing. Dong. Pause. Dong. Measured. Relentless. And loud enough to wake the dead, or at least the steward. You throw off the blanket and reach for your boots, which are, of course, cold. One is damp again. That corner of the room really does hate you. You pull them on anyway and trudge toward the chapel, your breath visible with every exhale. The castle chapel is tucked between the library and a narrow courtyard that always smells faintly of onions, no matter the season. You pass under a crumbling arch, past an old statue of Saint Eligius that's missing a hand and one eye, and push through the heavy door. Inside, it's dark but warmer than expected. A small brazier near the altar glows dimly, more for the priest's fingers than the souls of the faithful. A dozen or so people kneel in rows, guards, servants, a sleepy-eyed boy still wearing half a blanket like a shawl. You kneel too. Not because you want to impress anyone. Just because. Something about the quiet here feels different. Not peaceful, exactly. Just still. The priest begins. Low Latin phrases that drift into the rafters and vanish like smoke. You don't understand most of it. But that's fine. Understanding isn't required. Only presence. There's something about this part of castle life that feels older than the stone. People waking in the dark to whisper hopes, regrets, bargains with the heavens. Even those who don't believe entirely still show up. Just in case. Historians still argue whether castle prayers were more habit or belief. Some suggest matins was used more to enforce order than to commune with the divine, a way to keep people on a schedule, to remind them they were small cogs in a big, holy wheel. Others say faith ran deep, especially in places where life was short and pain was long. You close your eyes. Not to pray. Just to rest them. And in the brief hush between verses, you hear it again. The bells. Still echoing in your ears. But now, not from the tower. You frown and open your eyes. One of the novices looks up too, clearly confused. Another servant tilts their head. The priest falters, just slightly. Because there it is, faint, but unmistakable. Bells. From the west wing. Not the chapel. Not the bell tower. The bells that aren't supposed to ring. You stiffen. So does everyone else. Those bells were taken down years ago. Or so people say. Removed after they tolled 3 times during the old baron's death. No one pulled the rope. The tower was empty. And yet the bells rang. They say it was a warning. They say it meant something else had died that night too. The priest resumes chanting, a little faster now. Everyone bows their heads. But no one's really listening anymore. Your thoughts are back in the corridor, by that unused tower. The sealed door. The echo that never quite matched your footsteps. And the sound of bells. That no one should be able to ring. You finish the prayer. You file out. You head back to the hall, where the fire's been relit, and people pretend everything is normal. But later someone whispers, "Did you hear them?" And someone else answers, "I didn't want to." You lie back down, eyes open, waiting for the bells to ring again. You're barely under the blanket again when someone's coughing fits begin. Not the dainty kind. Not the clear your throat and carry on kind. No, this is the deep, wet, chest-rattling kind that sounds like someone trying to eject a lung with sheer force of will. It bounces off the stone walls like a drumbeat of dread. You roll onto your side and pull the blanket over your ears. Doesn't help. Nothing helps. Someone nearby mutters, "That's getting worse." Another voice whispers, "Should we tell the steward?" No point. He already knows. That sends a quiet ripple through the room, an unspoken understanding that whatever this is, it's not going away. You open your eyes. Across the hall, huddled under a too-thin blanket, is the coughing boy. Tom, barely 16, always cold, always pale, with fingers like twigs and that stubborn patch of hair that won't stay combed. You saw him yesterday helping in the kitchen, stirring a cauldron of barley soup with arms that looked too thin to lift the ladle. Now, he's shaking with every breath, coughing into his blanket like it's a shield. And no one moves to help. Because everyone knows the rule: if it lingers, stay away. You sit up slowly. You want to help. You want to say something comforting. But all you manage is a tired "here," as you toss your second cloak across the floor toward him. It lands in a heap beside his feet. Someone else nudges it closer. He doesn't thank you. He can't speak between the coughs. It's just understood. Illness in a medieval castle isn't a side note. It's a fact of life. A fear that hangs in the air like smoke. One person sneezes and 3 others shift away. A cough echoes and 5 heads turn. Even a feverish mutter can clear a room. There's no infirmary. No isolation wing. No helpful pot of tea and lemon waiting in the corner. There's a cold rag if you're lucky. A prayer if someone likes you. A priest if things go badly. And things often go badly. Historians still argue whether castle inhabitants truly understood contagion or just reacted instinctively to symptoms. Some say they feared miasma, the bad air, said to cause disease, while others believe they had an intuitive sense of transmission, avoiding the sick out of something closer to survival instinct than superstition. You've seen both. One servant swears by vinegar-soaked cloth tied over the mouth. Another burns dried rosemary in a pan and waves it through the halls like a homemade exorcism. But none of that stops the coughing. You glance across the room. Tom has slumped sideways now, breathing shallow and fast. Someone's placed a folded tunic under his head. Another person left a wooden cup by his side. You can't tell if it's water or weak ale. Either way, it's gone untouched. You lie back. The hall is quiet again, except for that cough. And now the tension is thicker than the cold. Because if he doesn't improve by tomorrow, someone will be told to carry him to the chapel. Not for healing, but for the last rites. You remember the last time that happened. A woman named Agnes. A cleaner, quiet, fast with a needle. One morning, she just didn't wake up. No ceremony. No wailing. Just a silent agreement that the blanket wouldn't be needed again. Someone made a note in the steward's ledger. Her name. Age, maybe? Cause of death? Probably written as fever. That's what everything gets called. You roll onto your side and pull the blanket to your chin. Sleep doesn't come easily when someone nearby is struggling to breathe. You begin to count his coughs. 6 in a row. A pause. 3 more. Then a long silence. You hold your breath. Then he coughs again. You exhale, ashamed of your relief. Tom doesn't want pity. He wants to rest. To sleep. To survive. You hope he does. You hope you all do. There she is again. You're not even surprised anymore. Lady Margaret, wrapped in layers of embroidered linen and fur-trimmed silk, gliding silently through the corridor like she's floating on a cushion of forgotten secrets. Her hair is unbound tonight, dark, loose, trailing down her back in waves that shimmer faintly in the torchlight. That alone is strange enough. Noblewomen don't walk around with their hair down after sunset. Not unless something's wrong. Or something's not quite right. She walks past your doorway without glancing in. Her feet don't make a sound. You hear the faint rustle of fabric. The soft click of her ringed fingers brushing the stone wall. And then, she stops. At the painting. Of her grandfather. You've seen her do it before. She always pauses there. Always just before dawn. Always alone. Some say she speaks to it. Others say the painting moves. You don't dare step out to see which is true. Everyone in the castle knows about Lady Margaret's late-night walks. No one talks about them in daylight, of course. That would be inappropriate. She is, after all, a noblewoman of high station. Her family lineage is stitched into the castle itself, and her dowry once paid for the West Wing's repairs. She is intelligent, respected, and during the day, sharp as a blade. But at night? At night she wanders. You've heard the whispers. That she lost a child. Or a lover. Or both. That she once had a vision in the chapel during matins, something that told her the dead still walk. That she was cursed by a rival family, and now cannot sleep unless she walks the halls that know her name. You've seen her before, just like this. Always barefoot. Always silent. Always stopping at the same places. The chapel door, the library archway, the sealed eastern stair. And the portrait. It's a large oil painting, faded and cracked, of a stern man in red with a falcon on his wrist. He stares at the hallway like he's waiting for someone to finish a sentence. The eyes follow you. That's not superstition, it's the way it was painted. But with her standing there, not blinking, whispering. Something you can't hear. You believe it might be more. She lifts one hand and gently touches the lower frame. Then, without a word, she turns and walks back the way she came. Past your doorway. Still not looking in. Still not acknowledging a single living soul. You pull your blanket tighter. Lady Margaret is not ghostly. She is very real. You've seen her at meals. You've heard her speak, laugh, scold a night into silence. But this version of her? This quiet shadow drifting through midnight stone? You don't speak to her. And neither does anyone else. Historians still argue whether stories like this, noblewomen walking halls at night, talking to paintings, whispering in corners, were real or exaggerated by bored servants and bad winters. But they show up in castle records more often than you'd expect. The lady stirs in darkness. One steward wrote cryptically in the margin of an inventory. No further explanation. You hear footsteps retreating down the corridor. They fade, slowly, softly, then silence. Someone behind you stirs in their sleep and mumbles. She always stops there. You don't reply. You don't need to. Everyone knows she does. And if you ever see her standing by the painting at dawn, pressing her forehead to the frame, you know better than to ask why. The hull cuts through the darkness like a blade. Not close, but not far enough either. Long, low, rising, ending with that sharp note at the top that makes your skin prickle like someone just whispered down your spine. You sit up fast, wide awake now. Others stir, shifting in the straw, muttering, swearing quietly. Another howl answers it. Then another. And another. Wolves. Out beyond the walls, in the woods just past the edge of the clearing, they're calling to each other. You can't see them from here, but you feel them. The sound travels across the snow-crusted ground, over the frozen moat, and into the bones of the castle like it's knocking on every timber beam and whispering, "We're still here." You wrap your cloak tighter, instinctively pulling your feet up from the floor, as though the stone itself might suddenly give way. Wolves weren't rare in medieval times. They were a constant presence, lurking in the forests, stealing livestock, watching from the tree line. People feared them, yes, but also respected them. Because wolves didn't attack recklessly. They waited. They tested. They hunted the edges first. And now they're howling. You cross the chamber and peer through the narrow window slit. The moon hangs low and wide, its pale light sliding across the frost-covered fields beyond the wall. You can't see anything moving. But that only makes it worse. Somewhere out there, they are waiting. First freeze. Someone murmurs behind you. That's when they come closest. You glance back. It's the stable hand, old Tom with the bad knee and better memory. He's wrapped in 2 cloaks and staring at nothing in particular. "St. Carrie's farther on cold air," he adds. You nod slowly. That makes sense. Somehow, everything seems sharper when it's cold. Every creak in the floor, every groan in the wall, every sound from the forest. It's like the world forgets how to muffle itself. Another howl, closer this time. Shorter. Urgent. You hear footsteps in the corridor. Not panicked, but faster than usual. One of the gatehouse guards heading up to the tower. He'll check the perimeter. Not that it will matter if the wolves really want in. You've heard stories. Everyone has. Wolves swimming moats. Wolves crossing frozen lakes. Wolves leaping short walls to reach the pigs or the chickens or, gods forbid, the dogs. One tale says a pack once made it to the outer bailey of a northern castle during a particularly brutal winter. When the guards finally reached them, all that remained was a trail of paw prints and a missing steward's boy. No one ever found the boots. Historians still debate how much of this is real and how much is fear turned into folklore. Some claim wolves rarely approached castles directly, preferring the easier pickings of nearby farms. Others suggest castle walls were little deterrent when food grew scarce. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, like most things in these long, cold nights. You step back from the window. "Won't come over the wall," someone says near the hearth. But they don't sound confident. Because a frozen moat? That's an open invitation. And even if the wolves don't come in, what if someone has to go out? A runner. A messenger. A desperate servant sent to check on firewood or fetch water from the outer well. There's always someone. You remember the shape of their eyes. You saw one once, years ago, near the tree-line. Yellow, sharp, silent. It didn't growl. It didn't move. It just watched. You still see that stare when you close your eyes. Another howl. Then silence. No echo this time. Everyone in the chamber is awake now. No one speaks. Even the snorers are quiet, as if the wolves pressed a paw across the castle's mouth. You lie. Back down and try to pretend the walls are high enough. That the moat is thick enough. That the guards are fast enough. But mostly you hope the wolves are full tonight. The smell hits before the sound does. Thick, oily, and sharp, like old fat left too close to the fire. You wrinkle your nose and lift your head from the blanket, just in time to hear the clatter. Someone dropped a pan. Then comes the unmistakable hiss of liquid meeting open flame. They're practicing again. You sit up, bleary-eyed, and rub the sleep from your face. Across the room, a few others are groaning as they do the same. No one asks what's happening. Everyone already knows. It's the night watch running a boiling oil drill. Again. You stumble to the corridor, tugging your cloak around your shoulders as the acrid smell thickens. Down the hall, in the upper bailey, a group of bleary-eyed guards are gathered by the wall walk, surrounding a fire-blackened cauldron suspended over a makeshift hearth. A young squire is ladling thick, greasy oil into the pot, his face flushed and eyebrows singed. The others watch, yawning, leaning on pikes. One of them is holding a helmet filled with sand, for reasons unclear and probably stupid. "Why now?" you mutter. "Better now than during an actual siege," a guard says, not looking up. He has a point. Castles were, by design, paranoid. Defense wasn't a Sunday concern. It was woven into daily life. The ramparts were patrolled. The gates reinforced. And above all, the defenders needed to be ready to pour pain on anyone who tried to breach the walls. Hence the boiling oil. Or, to be more accurate, heated fat, water, pitch, or sand. True boiling oil was rare. Too expensive, too dangerous, and frankly, too precious to waste on invaders. But that doesn't stop them from practicing with it anyway. Or at least something like it. The cauldron bubbles now, a foul brew of animal fat mixed with ashes and something that smells vaguely like burned onions. It's unpleasant. It's also remarkably flammable. One of the younger squires edges too close and nearly drops the ladle. Someone curses. Another guard grabs a wooden shield just in case things go very wrong. You watch, equal parts sleepy and concerned. They tilt the cauldron slightly, demonstrating the angle they'd used to pour it from the murder holes, the gaps between the stones and the parapets above the gatehouse. Another guard mimics dropping rocks and sand through the same space. The goal is to make anything climbing the wall regret their life choices fast. You've heard the stories. A single bucket of hot sand could fill every gap in a man's armor, burning him from the inside out. Pitch would stick to flesh like glue. Even scalding water could be fatal from high enough above. Historians still argue whether castles really used boiling oil as often as legend suggests. Some say it's an exaggeration, born of fear and hindsight. Others believe it was simply one of many tools in the defensive playbook, more likely than flaming arrows, less dramatic than trebuchets. But you've seen what happens when a squire trips during a drill. Last month, one slipped on spilled fat and took 3 others down with him. The smell of singed wool lasted for days. The kitchen had to throw out an entire sack of flour because it absorbed the scent. Tonight, they seem a little more cautious. Still, the smell is getting worse. You retreat back inside, rubbing the stink from your hands as best you can. Someone has already stuffed rags in the cracks under the door to keep the fumes out. Someone else is waving a bundle of dried mint around like a priest with holy water. You lie back down and groan softly. Because that's the thing with castle life. Even the training can kill you. You close your eyes. You try not to imagine what it would feel like to be on the outside of those walls, hearing the hiss, seeing the gleam of liquid poured from high above, knowing what's about to hit. You hope the drill ends soon. You hope they don't spill it again. You hope, just this once, nothing goes horribly wrong. Clang. The ladle drops. Someone yells. You groan into your blanket. Just another night in paradise. You can't sleep. Again. This time, it's not the wolves, or the wind, or the cough that won't quit from 2 mats over. No. This time, it's you. You lie there, eyes open, staring at the shadowed ceiling beam above your head. And for no good reason, your mind says, read something. That would be great, if books weren't rare, expensive, and usually chained to a lectern in a locked room guarded by a scribe who hates everyone under the age of 50. Still, you know where one might be left unattended. You slip out of bed, wrap your cloak around yourself, and creep into the corridor. The halls are quieter now. The castle has entered that strange middle-of-the-night stillness, where even the restless have settled, and only the truly odd are still moving. You tread lightly past the servant quarters, then up the spiral stairs. Toward the upper corridor. At the end, the chapel antechamber. And in it, if luck is on your side, a book. You crack the door open. There it is. Resting on a slanted reading table, its thick wooden covers closed but not locked. A prayer book, probably. Or a psalter. Maybe something about the lives of saints and the glories of divine punishment. Still, it has pages. And words. You'll take it. You strike flint to candle and ease yourself onto the bench. The light flickers, illuminating the first lines. Latin. Of course. But you recognize some phrases. Libera nos noct tenebris. Deliver us. Night. Darkness. Fitting. You begin to trace the letters with your eyes, mouthing the words softly. The candle glows warm, and for a moment, you feel like a scholar. Or a monk. Or something holier than a half-frozen servant hiding from snoring and grease fires. You lose track of time. You flip another page. And then, you feel it. A shift. Not in the room. In the air. The candle flickers harder, though the corridor is still. You pause. Look up. There's a shadow on the far wall. Not yours. Not the candle's. It doesn't move. It waits. You slowly turn your head. Nothing's there. You're alone. Probably. You try to read again. But now the letters blur. The words feel heavier. Someone once said reading at night invites strange company. That when the rest of the world sleeps, the castle watches. And if it catches you reading things not meant for you, it remembers. Historians still argue whether castle literacy was reserved entirely for clergy and nobles, or whether some servants, scribes, and guards learned out of sheer proximity to knowledge. There are accounts of kitchen boys who became monks, and stable hands who copied manuscripts in the margins of prayer books. Some were caught. Some were not. You run your finger along the page, tracing an illuminated initial, an M, with a serpent coiled through it. There's a tiny figure drawn into the design. A man, holding a candle, looking over his shoulder. You stare at it. He looks scared. You close the book. The candle flickers lower. You blow it out. The room goes dark. You walk back to your bed, slower now. Listening. Not for footsteps, but for something else. Something watching. You slide under your blanket. You didn't get to read much. But you learned enough. Some words aren't meant for night. And some shadows don't leave when the candle goes out. They're missing. Again. Not a loud absence. Not a scream or a splatter of blood. Just gone. You wake to the usual cold, the usual stench of straw and feet, the usual tension that builds when too many people sleep in the same room. But something's off. Subtle at first. You blink. Look around. Then someone whispers it. "Where's Darren?" You sit up. Darren. One of the guards. Not important enough to get his own room, but trusted enough to be assigned the night watch rotation. Always had a crooked smile. Always whittling something with that little knife he kept tucked in his boot. He should be snoring by now, curled in the corner with his back to the door like always. But he's not. You glance around. Others are waking too. The whisper spreads like spilled oil. Faces twist into concern. Then calculation. Because this isn't the first time. 3 weeks ago, a kitchen lad vanished. Before that, an older scribe who walked the corridors at night muttering about ink formulas and saints with burning eyes. No one heard anything. No signs. Just gone. Each time, the same response, silence. No alarm raised. No search parties. Just a quiet acknowledgement among the servants, the way one might notice a pot missing from the shelf. Not ideal, but manageable. You stand across the chamber and check Darren's mat. Still slightly warm. His cloak is gone. So is his dagger. No boot knife. That could mean he was called to duty. Or it could mean he left. Or it could mean something else entirely. You walk into the corridor. The torches are burning low now, their flames hiccuping with the wind. The air smells of ash and old grease. You glance toward the main stairwell. No guards posted there either. Odd. You head toward the gatehouse. Just to check. The courtyard is empty, save for one dog pawing at a frozen bucket and a kitchen girl dumping slop for the pigs. No sign of Darren. The guard at the gate shrugs when you ask. "He's not back yet," he says, like that's not alarming. "No one's seen him since before midnight." The guard rubs his nose and mutters. "Happens sometimes." You frown. That's not an answer. You turn back toward the inner corridor. The walls feel heavier than usual. The wind winds down a passage to your right like it's trying to say something through stone. Maybe Darren slipped and fell somewhere. Maybe he took the wrong turn in the dark. Maybe he walked out past the stables for some air and met a patch of ice that didn't forgive. Or maybe... You glance up toward the sealed stair, the one no one uses anymore. You've heard things about that tower. Not just ghost stories. Real things. Like how the last person assigned to sweep it didn't return. Or how someone once found a torch still burning by the upper door, but no one nearby to claim it. Historians still argue whether medieval castles had bad wings, areas avoided, left unspoken, quietly quarantined from daily life. Some think it's superstition. Others point to strange architectural changes, sudden stairways to nowhere, rooms bricked up mid-construction, corridors misaligned with the rest of the floor plan. Like someone meant to hide something and then forgot what, or who, was hidden. You shake off the thought and return to your quarters. People are still whispering. One of them tries to laugh it off. He probably just wandered off with the ale jug again. No one joins in. Because deep down, everyone knows Darren's gone. And he's not coming back. You settle into your blanket. No one will report it. Not officially. There'll be no page in the scribe's book. No tally mark. Just one less bowl at breakfast. One less blanket to fight over. One more shadow in the castle. Waiting. You're not superstitious. Or at least you tell yourself that. But as you trudge toward the chapel for early morning bread and weak ale, you avoid stepping on the middle stone in the third row of the cloister walk. You don't know why, just that no one steps on it. Ever. Maybe it's cracked. Maybe it's cursed. Maybe someone died there during the last siege and no one ever scrubbed the stain completely away. But the foot veers, automatically, every single time. You line up with the others near the benches. The priest isn't here yet, but the baker's apprentice has already dropped off the morning loaves. You take a piece. It's hard. Not stale, just aggressively baked. You chew it anyway. Someone leans close and whispers. They saw the lights again. You glance sideways. Where? The west turret. Around the sealed door. You roll your eyes. Again? They nod. 3 witnesses. And the dog wouldn't go near. That part gets you. Animals know. There's a pause as both of you gnaw on bread, the only crunch louder than the silence. The chapel door creaks. You both flinch, but it's only the priest, old Father Etienne, bundled in so many layers he looks like a human haystack. He begins muttering his morning prayers in Latin, half asleep. You sit down. And you think about those lights. No one talks about them during daylight. But at night, the whispers come out like rats from the walls. Flickers in empty towers. Footsteps in hallways with no doors. Faces seen in window panes 5 stories above the ground, with no floors behind them. Some say the castle was built on cursed ground. Others insist it's just the weight of too many buried dead, too many secrets pressed into stone. You once heard a story about a builder, an old mason, who refused to lay the final keystone in the northwest arch. Said it wasn't right. That something was waiting behind it. They paid him extra. He vanished a week later. The arch still stands, but it creaks in warm weather. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in hauntings or if these were just metaphors, ways to explain grief, or fear, or the awful silence that clings to stone halls at 2 a.m. But some castle records mention rooms withdrawn from use, or towers no longer entered for reasons of health. You know what that means. The bread crumbles in your mouth like ash. You glance toward the upper gallery. It's still dark. Empty. But you think, just for a moment, you saw something move. A figure. Tall. Slow. Gone. You blink hard. Nothing there. Probably a shadow. Or a trick of the torchlight. Or your imagination begging for attention after a week of poor sleep, stale food, and whispers about lights that no one ever confirms in daylight. Still, you keep your back to the gallery. You eat faster. The taste doesn't matter. Because when the castle chooses to show you something, you don't look twice. You hear it before you see it. Thud, scrape, drag. You freeze in the corridor, heart hitching in your chest like a startled horse. The sound is heavy, wet somehow, coming from somewhere just beyond the kitchen arch. Thud, scrape, drag. You edge closer, trying not to breathe too loudly. The passage is dim. Just one torch lit. The others have burned down to stubby orange nubs, their smoke curling up like lazy ghosts. You glance back. No one's behind you. You step forward. Around the corner, past the barrels of salted fish and the sacks of grain, you see it. A trail. Thick. Dark. Uneven. Not blood. Not quite. Something blacker, stickier, almost tar-like, smeared across the flagstones in a line that leads out of the scullery and into the narrow stairwell behind the pantry. You stare at it. Then you hear the sound again. Thud, scrape, drag. This time, it's overhead. You shouldn't go up there. You know you shouldn't go up there. But castles don't give you much choice. You head for the stair. Each step creaks. Underfoot. You curse the builders, the weather, your own curiosity. At the top, the air changes. Warmer. Wetter. Smells like iron and mold. You swallow hard. The hallway is empty. Mostly. Except for the marks. More of that dark trail. Here and there. Streaked along the wall, as though something brushed past while being pulled. Or pulling itself. You round the bend toward the old storage chamber. The door is open. Only slightly. You approach. Inside is nothing but barrels. And silence. Until something shifts behind one of them. You stop breathing. Then movement. A rat. Fat. Blind in one eye. Dragging a piece of cloth. You let out a breath so fast it feels like you've been underwater. Just a rat. But the trail? Still unexplained. Historians still argue what medieval people feared most. Was it hunger, plague, war, or the unseen things they swore moved at night? Some point to the meticulous records kept of strange events. A black trail seen near the granary. Or, sounds like chains in the tower. Or, a smell not of this world in the upper stairwell. Margins filled with crosses. Pages half torn out. They weren't writing poetry. They were warning someone. You back away. The rat disappears. The chamber door swings a little wider as you go. Back down the stairs, faster now. Past the dark streaks. Past the shadows that now feel like they're following. You reach the kitchen and don't stop moving until you're back near the fire, where people are awake and talking and spilling porridge on their sleeves. You sit. You breathe. And you say nothing. Because whatever left that trail, you're not sure it's gone. You're just sure it knows you saw it. Someone is knocking. Not loud. Not frantic. Just steady. Knock. 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 It comes from the outer courtyard gate. Too late for travelers, too early for deliveries, and far past the time any decent soul should be wandering the woods. You sit up in your bunk. You're not the only one who heard it. Others rise, groggy and silent, exchanging glances that say what no one dares voice. Who would knock at this hour? The guards shift uneasily. One mutters something about ghosts needing permission to enter. Another swears it's just a tree branch. But everyone knows that gate. It's thick oak, iron-bound, and far from any tree that could tap it with such rhythm. Knock. 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 3 times. Then silence. You throw on your cloak and follow a few others toward the gatehouse. It's still dark, stars barely winking through the heavy clouds. The wind carries a bite, and your breath fogs instantly. The outer gate looms ahead, tall, shadowy, and very much shut. A torch flares as a guard lights one near the watch platform. He steps forward, hesitates, then presses his ear to the wood. Nothing. Then knock. 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 He jumps back like he's been slapped. Who goes there? He calls, voice shaking more than it should. No reply. He tries again, louder this time. Identify yourself! Still nothing. The gate doesn't rattle. The hinges don't creak. It's as if the very idea of someone, or something, is out there, unseen but undeniably present. Eventually, one of the braver squires lifts the hatch to peer through the narrow view slit. "What do you see?" someone whispers. He doesn't answer for a long time. Then, "Nothing." He steps back, pale as milk. "There's no one there." Someone scoffs, trying to chase the fear away with disbelief. "Then who knocked?" No one answers. Historians still argue whether medieval folk believed in the supernatural as literal truth or as convenient explanations for strange happenings. Castle records sometimes include phrases like, "The gate was rapped by no hand," or, "The night visitor spoke no name." Superstition was survival, if not from real monsters, then from the overwhelming terror of not knowing. The guard orders the torch doused. Everyone retreats. You don't sleep. Because now you know the sound of silence after the knock. That awful, stretching hush that feels like something is waiting. You lie awake and think about boundaries. A moat is a boundary. So is a wall, a locked gate, a lit torch. But sometimes, things knock not to get in. Sometimes they knock to remind you. They could. The bell rings. Not the chapel bell. This one's different. Lower. Slower. Older. It tolls only once. And that's enough. Everyone freezes. A knife clinks to the floor in the kitchen. In the yard, the farrier drops his tongs. A child clutches her mother's sleeve, eyes wide. Because that bell, the old iron one up in the north turret, is never supposed to ring. It's reserved for exactly one thing, death within the walls. You stand. Someone's already running toward the main stairwell. Others follow in grim silence, no words needed. No one questions it. That sound cuts through bone and memory alike. Even if you've never heard it before, you know what it means. You reach the base of the turret. The door is open. That's the first problem. It's never open. The spiral stair beyond hasn't been used in months, maybe years. Not since the last repairs were abandoned due to structural instability, though rumors claimed it was something far older, deeper. You hesitate. Then step inside. The air changes instantly. Cooler. Thicker. Like the space itself resents being disturbed. Up you go. The climb is long, the stones uneven. Each step creaks like a protest. You grip the wall, half expecting the whole thing to shift beneath your feet. Then you reach the top. And there it is. The bell. Still swaying slightly, even though no one's nearby to have rung it. And beside it, something worse. A boot. Just one. Black leather. Well worn. Familiar. Your heart stutters. It's Darren's. The one who vanished. The one everyone pretended had left, or slipped, or chosen to go. But no one chooses to leave just one boot behind. You glance around. No sign of him. No blood. No torn fabric. Just that bell, swinging gently, whispering its sorrow with each creak. A guard appears behind you, breath ragged. "Is that?" He starts, but doesn't finish. You both nod. You both know. You pick up the boot. It's warm. That's the worst part. Something was here. Just here. Historians still argue over castle disappearances. Some chalk them up to harsh conditions, poor records, or opportunistic fleeing during sieges. But others point to strange consistencies. Personal items left behind, bells rung at odd hours, sealed towers reopened by no human hand. You descend slowly. Back on the ground, the others wait. You hold up the boot. A wave of silence spreads. One woman crosses herself. A boy cries quietly into his sleeve. The priest steps forward and mutters a few words. Not a funeral rite. Not yet. But close. You return to your chamber. There's no sleep that night. The bell's echo stays with you, long after the sound itself has faded. You hear it in your teeth, in your chest, in the spaces behind your eyes when you try to close them. Because that bell didn't just ring for Darren. It rang for you. A warning. A promise. And the worst part? The clapper is missing. There's a draft in your chamber now. It wasn't there yesterday. Not the usual kind, where wind sneaks through cracks in the shutters or whistles down the chimney like it's lost its way. This draft is cold. And it's coming from the wall. Specifically, the space behind it. You crouch beside the rough stonework and run your fingers along the lower edge. It's damp, as always, but now there's something else. Movement. A whisper of air rising through what looks like a seam in the stone. Barely noticeable. Unless you were looking for it. Which, tonight you are. You fetch a taper and relight the stub of the old candle near your bed. Its flame dances uneasily, then pulls, ever so slightly, toward the wall. That's enough. You knock once. The sound is dull. Hollow. You knock again. Something knocks back. You don't breathe. You don't blink. You just stay there, hunched, heart clawing at your ribs like it wants out. The knock came from inside the wall. Castles, you remember, are built in layers. Secret staircases. Priest holes. Forgotten storage corridors bricked up during renovations no one ever finished. It's not unheard of for someone to find a hidden space behind their chamber, usually with mice. Occasionally with bones. You press your ear to the stone. Silence. Then, softly, almost gently, you hear breathing. Breathing. You jolt back, nearly dropping the candle. You know you should leave. Find someone. Report it. But you also know what happens to people who ask questions in the wrong tone. So instead, you mark the stone. Just a tiny scratch with your boot knife. Enough to see if it moves. Then you blow out the candle. And wait. The next morning, the mark is gone. Not worn down. Not faded. Gone. You ask the old mason, quietly, if he knows anything about hollow walls. He stares at you for a long moment, then mutters something about prayer chambers and sealed sins. You press. He walks away. You go back to your room. You run your fingers along the stone again. The draft is still there. So is the breathing. Only now it's faster. Historians still argue whether castles had penitential cells, tiny sealed rooms used to punish monks or lock away madmen. Some were built without doors. Just a narrow slit for food, water, and air. A place to reflect. Or to disappear. You lie awake, listening. You try to tell yourself it's the wind. You try not to picture fingers brushing the other side of that wall. You try not to wonder who, or what, you're sharing a room with. Because deep in your bones you already know. Some parts of this castle were never meant to be found. And some things behind the walls? They're awake now. The water's wrong. You don't notice it at first. Not until the cook leans over the well bucket, scowls, and mutters, "Smells like teeth." You pause mid-step, not entirely sure what that means. But then someone else lifts a cup and recoils, gagging. And then you smell it too. It's not rot, exactly. Or sulfur. It's metallic. Like rust and breath, and something pulled from under a grave. You walk to the courtyard well. The rope is damp, the bucket slick, but not with clean water. A sheen floats on top, thin, rainbowed, and swirling like oil. People whisper. Someone blames a dead rat. Another swears the monks upstream have cursed you. Someone more practical suggests the old burial site may be collapsed into the underground stream. That happens sometimes. You build your well above one source and, decades later, it connects with something else. A place it never should have touched. You lower the bucket again. It hits bottom too soon. When you pull it up, it's heavier than it should be. You look inside. Water. And a tooth. Not a human one. Not quite. Larger. Curved. Yellowed and cracked. You put the bucket down and walk away. That night, no one drinks from the well. They boil wine, melt snow, crush frost from stones. No one wants to taste what came from beneath. Historians still argue how common water contamination was in medieval castles. Some say the proximity of latrines to wells made illness inevitable. Others note the care taken with certain water sources, especially sacred springs or glacial melt-fed cisterns. But scattered records mention moments where wells were blighted, darkened, or simply spoiled without cause. In those cases, the entries end with ominous notes. The old tunnel reopened. A monk was sent into the shaft. The wall sealed again with lime and ash. You don't sleep well. You keep hearing the pulley creaking outside. Like someone, or something, is still using the well. You rise near dawn, drawn by curiosity you can't justify. You find the rope taut, trembling, and wet footprints on the stones beside the bucket. They trail away, toward the shadows under the stair. Not rushed. Not panicked. Just wet. You don't follow. Instead, you pull the bucket up one last time. It's empty. Except for something that wasn't there before. Another tooth. Smaller. Human. You drop it. Back away. Some things in castles, like water or light, or the illusion of safety, shouldn't be trusted after dark. Especially when the well gives more than it takes. It starts with scratching. Faint. Rhythmic. Coming from the beams above your bed. You try to ignore it, convince yourself it's rats, or the wind tugging at a loose tile. But the sound grows louder. Not frantic like claws. More deliberate. Like something is trying to write. You sit up. It stops. You lie down. It starts again. Eventually you stand, grab your candle, and climb the narrow service stair toward the attic garret. A place not meant for people anymore. Dust chokes the air. Cobwebs cling to your face like old secrets. The beams stretch low. The roof creaks under a weight that shouldn't be there. You scan the floor. It's bare. Just a few broken crates, dried straw, and a wooden post scorched at the base from a long dead lantern. Then you see them. Marks. Carved into the beam. Thin, shallow lines, hundreds of them. Tallies. Always in clusters of 5. You trace one with your finger. The wood is soft here, as if cut recently. Too recently. In the corner, a bundle of old fabric lies folded. You nudge it with your boot. Bones spill out. Small. Long. Not animal. You stagger back. Behind the bones, scratched onto the wall, are words, barely legible, written in something far darker than ink. He hears when we sleep. Your breath catches. You look up. There's another beam. More tallies. And beside them, a face. Not a real one. Just a charcoal sketch. But it's there. Watching. The eyes scratched so deep the wood splits around them. You back down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. At the bottom, you slide the door closed and place a crate in front of it. Just in case. Historians still argue whether castle garrets were used as storage, punishment, or quarantine. Many castles included sealed-off attics, inaccessible by design, especially during times of plague or unrest. Some chroniclers mention marks left by the damned, or the forgotten above the beams. You tell no one what you saw. But that night, the scratching returns. This time, it doesn't stop when you sit up. And now it's not above you. It's under the bed. You don't check. You don't move. Because you realize something terrifying. Those tallies? They weren't counting days. They were counting visits. And tonight? It's your turn. You awaken to silence. Not the usual kind, thin and temporary, punctuated by snores and distant clatter, but something deeper. A held breath kind of silence. You rise slowly. The fire's gone cold. The coals shouldn't have died so fast. Your chamber is darker than it should be. The shutters are still latched, yet the light outside feels absent. As if the dawn has changed its mind. You step into the corridor. Empty. Even the rats seem to have abandoned the halls. Then, from far above, a sound. A door unlatching. You know that sound. It's the high turret, the one that hadn't opened in generations, sealed with mortar and sacred oil after the last siege. The one rumored to hold things that never quite died. You should turn back. But your feet are already moving. Up the spiral stair. Past the chapel, past the bell tower, higher than you've ever gone. You reach the landing. The door is ajar. You press it gently. It creaks open without resistance. Inside is a chamber of stone and dust. Forgotten banners cling to the corners. A table remains in the center, warped by time, and on it, a book, bound in leather, clasps tarnished black. It's open. You step closer. The page is blank. Then, slowly, lines appear, scratched by an invisible hand. He wakes when the quiet is deepest. He feeds on what is hidden. He waits beneath the stone you've walked on 1,000 times. You slam the book shut, heart in your throat. Behind you a breath. Long. Slow. Not yours. You turn. Nothing. And yet, the air pulses with something vast. Old. You flee. Down, down, each step echoing louder than the last. When you reach the yard, the light has returned. People are waking. Talking. Laughing. You stand there, disoriented, as if the world snapped back into place. But one thing has changed. The stone beneath your foot, the one just outside the chapel, the one no one ever stepped on, it's cracked and warm. Historians still argue whether medieval people believed castles could be alive, not metaphorically, but truly. That stone's held memory. That deep foundations bred something watchful. Some called it the old keeper. Others called it the buried guest. You look around at the waking castle. Someone hums a tune from the bakery. A child chases a dog. A priest lights incense. Normalcy. But you know better. The castle blinked last night. It saw you. And it's still awake. So now, as the last torch dims and the castle settles once more into its cold and heavy slumber, you lie back on your straw-stuffed mattress, eyes tracing the shadows cast along the cracked ceiling. The sounds of the night return, not the frightening ones now, but the familiar. The slow drip of condensation in the corridor. The gentle creak of wood expanding and shrinking with the weather. The distant hush of wind curling along the tower eaves. All around you, the stone holds its breath. And you, weary traveler of time and tale, begin to let go. You feel the thickness of the wool blanket over your chest. The weight of your limbs softening. The tension in your shoulders loosening, bit by bit, as though every whispered legend and strange sound has finally played itself out. Even the cold seems less biting now. Your body remembers the rhythm of the castle nights, slow, ancient, steeped in silence. Not safe, no, but steady. The kind of rhythm that lulls you despite its hidden menace. You imagine the flicker of firelight against old shields. The scent of herbs hung from beams. The scuff of your own feet on worn stones. Details that tether you here, not to fear, but to familiarity. The world isn't kind, but it is consistent in its strangeness. Your breath slows. Whatever secrets the castle holds, they are quiet for now. Watching, maybe. Waiting. But content to let you sleep. And as your eyes drift shut, the fear no longer clings. Just wonder. Just the soft pull of story. Let the torches burn low. Let the walls press in around you like arms. You are not alone here. You never were. Sleep now. And may the keep hold its peace till morning.